Let's break this down. Us versus them mentality. How right-wing media creates an existential battle narrative. The role of the enemy, whether it's immigrants, liberals, or the deep state, in maintaining coercion. So this tactic is straight out of the Nazi playbook, where Jews, communists, and other marginalized groups were scapegoated to unify the masses under a common enemy. Remember, before the Nazis went after the Jews, they went after the socialists, the communists, and the trade unionists first. Why? Because they were the ones who were most organized and ready to challenge their power as a working class collective. Modern parallels. The MAGA movement thrives on this mentality, with figures like Trump and his allies stoking fear and division. But as we've seen in history, this strategy has a shelf life. Post-World War II Germany offers a compelling case study in societal deprogramming after the collapse of an authoritarian regime. The Allies forced German civilians to confront the atrocities of the Nazi regime, leading to widespread shock and a moral reckoning. Could a similar reckoning be on the horizon for MAGA? Breaking the spell. How to deprogram without alienation. And here's where we get to the crux of the matter. How do you talk to someone who has bought into the cult of right-wing rhetoric? Yelling at them simply won't work. Calling them stupid won't work. But what does work is strategic, empathetic questioning, cognitive dissonance, and denial. While some were successfully deprogrammed, many Germans still clung to the denial or rationalizing to protect themselves from guilt. Imagine how much guilt you would have to feel if you were tricked into supporting a whole regime did a Holocaust or genocide on an entire race of people. However, as the horrors became undeniable, some did experience a deep moral reckoning, while others remained resentful or dismissive. Profit Profits, an expose on pseudo-economics. This is something that's very important, but it's something that I've wanted to jump into for a while, because you don't know how much crap I get from people sending me videos from people like Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro, and it's pretty much just junk analysis. Alright, there we go. Sorry about that, everybody. Welcome back. You have entered the rabbit hole. If you're watching this video, chances are you've started to question the narratives that have been fed to you. Maybe something doesn't sit right. Maybe you feel like you're constantly being told who the enemy is. Immigrants, the left, scientists, journalists, socialists. But have you ever stopped to ask, who benefits from me believing all this? The truth is, the modern right-wing media machine is not about truth. It's about control. It's about keeping you angry and afraid and distracted while the ultra-rich consolidate power. This series will start breaking down the carefully designed psychological tools used to manipulate you into defending a system that works against you. Welcome to another controversial episode of the Red Pill series, where we peel back the layers of history, manipulation, and belief systems that shape our world. I'm your host, the Benefactor, and today we're diving into the shadows of the past, tracing the echoes of cult dynamics, political movements, and the charismatic figures that have led people down unexpected paths. Buckle up, because this one is going to be a deep dive into both historical precedent and present-day implications. So we're going to jump into segment one, which is my red pill analysis, We might have to do the intermission before segment 2, depending on my schedule here. I have to do something in about 30 minutes, and I will be back. So, with that said, I'm going to try to get this done before that mark. Let me bring up the guide for you so you can follow along behind me. All right. So this is segment 1, my red pill analysis. The power of charisma, a double-edged sword. So, moving into the post-World War II period offers a compelling case study for understanding societal deprogramming after the collapse of an authoritarian regime, or a mass ideological movement like Nazism, which can provide insights for considering the future of movements like MAGA. Here's how Nazi Germany transitioned in and out of a cult of personality, and how it might serve as a parallel for America as we know it today. So, using charisma as a potent force. It can inspire revolutions, unite communities, and rally movements. But it also has a dark side. From religious leaders to political figures, history is riddled with individuals who used their personal magnetism to captivate and control. The real question is, how do we distinguish between genuine leadership and dangerous manipulation? So as we ponder these questions, we have some interesting pictures for you to follow along with in the background. So, historical case studies. The cult of personality, figures like Jim Jones, L. Ron Hubbard, and even more mainstream political leaders have leveraged their presence to build unwavering followings. But let's not forget the ultimate cautionary tale, Adolf Hitler. The day he became chancellor, he pardoned 8,000 violent Nazi war criminals, setting the stage for a regime built on fear, propaganda, and absolute loyalty. Fast forward to today, and we see eerie parallels. On the first day of his hypothetical second term, Trump has floated the idea of pardoning the January 6th insurrectionists, a move that would further entrench his cult of personality. Now, since then, he actually did that. Now, this is a dangerous parallel to historical precedents in authoritarian regimes, how they've risen. Political profits. How McCarthyism, Reagan-era conservatism, and even more modern movements have shaped the beliefs of entire generations. These movements often rely on charismatic leaders who frame themselves as saviors, whether it's Trump as a political messiah or figures like Elon Musk, who are increasingly merging corporate power with political influence. Musk's recent actions, blocking elected officials from government buildings while granting himself access, echoes Mussolini's definition of fascism as the successful merger of corporate and state power. Remember, it's been attempted before, but never has it been successful on a level like this. Now remember the age of McCarthyism. McCarthyism is also known as the Second Red Scare. It was the political repression and persecution of left-wing individuals as a campaign spreading fear of communism and Soviet influence on American institutions, and of Soviet espionage in the United States during the late 1940s through the 1950s. This is essentially what I theorize inspired the Cold War syndrome. People who are still fearing socialism to the point where they don't learn about it, they just are regurgitating old Cold War propaganda meant to scare you into looking right when you really should be looking left if you're a worker. So this echoes in modern media. The way Tucker Carlson, Ben Shapiro, and others use emotional appeal rather than logic to create a sense of belonging. These figures are the architects of pseudo-economics, pushing narratives that blame the working class for their struggles while obscuring the systemic exploitation by the elite. What's going on, Taryn? How you doing, guys? You saying mic check 1 2 volume. Is the mic too low or too high? Because I can lower it or I can increase it. Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. Yes, so it's probably a little too low. Mic check 1 2. There we go. That's probably a little better if I keep it a little closer to my mouth. And let's increase it. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. You know, I think my mic settings might actually have gone back to default because it should be a lot louder than this. I had it set up so I could just set it down and not have to keep it up against my mouth. Let me double check. Yeah, it went back. Let's increase it a little bit. How's that? That a little better? That's probably better. Yep, that looks better. All right. Let's keep it around there. If you guys need me to adjust the mic, just let me know. So let's continue on with echoes in modern media. Oh, awesome. These two are total mouth breathers. The right-wing playbook, borrowing from cult psychology. One of the most fascinating aspects of right-wing political movements is their ability to adapt and evolve using techniques borrowed from religious and cult organizations. Let's break this down. Us versus them mentality. How right-wing media creates an existential battle narrative. The role of the enemy, whether it's immigrants, liberals, or the deep state, in maintaining coercion. So this tactic is straight out of the Nazi playbook, where Jews, communists, and other marginalized groups were scapegoated to unify the masses under a common enemy. Remember, before the Nazis went after the Jews, they went after the socialists, the communists, and the trade unionists first. Why? Because they were the ones who were most organized and ready to challenge their power as a working class collective. And as we discussed earlier, Benito Mussolini, the godfather of modern-day fascism, described modern-day fascism as a successful unification of corporate and state power. If the corporate agenda directly contradicts the working class agenda, then what the corporate agenda fears is the working class collectivizing and organizing against the corporate agenda. So that was why they went after socialists, communists, and trade unionists first. They were the most well-organized and the most ready to fight against tyranny. Modern parallels. The MAGA movement thrives on this mentality, with figures like Trump and his allies stoking fear and division. But as we've seen in history, this strategy has a shelf life. Post-World War II Germany offers a compelling case study in societal deprogramming after the collapse of an authoritarian regime. The Allies forced German civilians to confront the atrocities of the Nazi regime, leading to widespread shock and a moral reckoning. Could a similar reckoning be on the horizon for MAGA? Charismatic figures as Masonic leaders. Trump as a political messiah. Why his followers see him as a savior rather than a flawed politician. Well, the role of media amplification is reinforcing the mythos. Elon Musk as a corporate warlord. So Musk's alignment with Trump and his willingness to use his corporate power to undermine democratic institutions is a chilling echo of the 1930s era, when Hitler leveraged industrialists like Krupp and I.G. Farben to dismantle the Weimar Republic. The question is, will Musk face consequences for his actions, or will he continue to operate above the law? Well, the third role here of the playbook for cult psychology is also dismantling critical thinking. right? You want that sheep mentality. You don't want the one person who says, what the F are you guys doing? You know, or what does this mean? Or thinking about the deeper questions in general. They just want everybody to go along with the flow. So how conspiracy theories function as a replacement for independent thought. Well, the danger of echo chambers and self-reinforcing beliefs systems encapsulate that idea, right? If you find yourself in an echo chamber when you're in a cult of personality and you don't feel comfortable being challenged, but you do feel comfortable within that community, within the people who do agree with the cult of personality. You feel a sense of community within that cult of personality. But as soon as you start challenging and going against that sheep mentality, they get very, very confrontational, and sometimes they dismiss you from the group. The role of pseudo-economics. Well, influencers like Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson push narratives to blame individuals for their economic struggles while obscuring systemic issues. By redirecting working class anger towards culture war distractions, they prevent the kind of collective action that could challenge the status quo. For instance, by focusing on the, pronouns arguments, while most people are most really concerned about the working class arguments. Sure, there's, an argument in that respect, but to conflate the overall leftist agenda to be anything but a working class agenda is to obscure and mislead people about the left in general. So, and that's what people like Ben Shapiro like to do. Using logical fallacies, as we've discussed in the first episode of the series, where I teach you how to break down topics with critical thinking skills and dismantle some of those logical fallacies and apply a more logical, dialectical thinking to the situation. So if you have not seen that episode, I suggest you go back to episode 1 of the Red Pill series. And it's a really great lecture that I put together for you guys, very easy to understand, and it will help you form more coherent and cogent arguments, and help you avoid very weak arguments and arguments that don't hold up logically. So that is a very important function of critical thinking. You want to learn how to dismantle some of those logical fallacies, specifically the common ones like the strawman fallacy, the ad hominem fallacy, which I get all the time, from people just attacking me because I'm a socialist. Well, that's fine that you don't like socialism, but what's the reason that you don't like socialism? Don't just say you don't like socialism and don't provide a reason behind it, because then you just seem like a bigot. So, breaking the spell. How to deprogram without alienation. Now, this is very important because we don't want to alienate our fellow our fellow Trump supporters. Let's be honest. A lot of us have Trump supporters who we, in our families, in our friend circles, who we love and we care for. But we have to address the situation very carefully because we don't want to alienate them and make them feel like we're just criticizing them. No. What we try to do is subtly suggest that some of the logic or some of the thinking that they have going on isn't really logical, by making them ask the questions themselves. And here's where we get to the crux of the matter. How do you talk to someone who has bought into the cult of right-wing rhetoric? Yelling at them simply won't work. Calling them stupid won't work. But what does work is strategic, empathetic questioning. Here's a few approaches. The Socratic method. Instead of arguing, ask, what would convince you otherwise? Or why do you trust this source over another? Example of this is, if somebody believes in the myth of trickle-down economics, ask them to explain how cutting taxes for the wealthy has ever benefited the working class in the past 40 years. Just one example. Okay, so another way that we can deprogram without alienation is bridge building through shared values. This is another extremely important one. We have to find common ground. After all, we have more in common as workers from left to right political spectrum, through the left to right political spectrum, than we do with people like Trump and Elon Musk. So we have to find that common ground and remind ourselves that there is that common ground. If they value freedom, discuss how unchecked corporate power threatens personal liberties just as much as government regulation. So an example of this is you can highlight how billionaires like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos have amassed obscene wealth while workers struggle to make ends meet. Ask, is this the kind of freedom we want? Another way of deprogramming without alienation is introducing dissonance gently, right? You want to gently suggest, not force. Instead of shattering their worldview, plant seeds. For example, if the media is lying about everything, why does Fox News, as a media company, get a pass? Example, if you point out the contradictions in right-wing narratives, such as the glorification of the gig economy, while ignoring the exploitative nature, such as the glorification of the gig economy while ignoring its exploitative nature. Right? So, yeah, sure, on the surface of it, the gig economy might seem like it's more freedom for you, but in actuality, you're being screwed over more. You're living day to day, not paycheck to paycheck. Trust me, I've been there. I've done that. You don't want to be in that situation. Sure, some people do use the gig economy as a substitute for a second job. But the people who rely on it as a main job, no, it's extremely exploitative. So going back to what happened to Nazi civilians during the end of World War II. Well, shock of defeat and exposure to reality happened. After the war ended, the full scale of Nazi crimes, including the Holocaust, was revealed to the general Nazi public. The Allied forces forced German civilians to visit concentration camps to witness the atrocities firsthand. I mean, again, a lot of these people are like the Trump supporters who say, no, they're not going to commit any human rights violations against these immigrants when they put them to Guantanamo Bay. They're not going to commit any atrocities. They're just going to detain them. No, they put babies in cages. That's an atrocity. Okay? So it's literally paralleling the same thing. So this led to widespread shock and a moral reckoning, as many had either denied or been unaware of the true extent of the regime's crimes. Remember, they just bought into all the spoon-fed propaganda that the Nazi regime had spoon-fed to the public. I have a feeling that something similar might happen if Trump does go through with his Guantanamo Bay concentration camp for immigrants. And this is a warning, so marks my words on this subject. Okay? The devastation of Germany, both physical and economic, also forced civilians to confront the catastrophic consequences of Nazi policies. All right, so another thing that happened was denazification. So this was essentially their version of deprogramming. The Allies implemented a program of denazification, which aimed to remove Nazi ideology from public life and institutions. We might see something similar once we see the downfall of the Trump regime, the de-Trumpification of America. So the denazification included purging former Nazi Party members from positions of power, banning Nazi symbols, and dismantling propaganda. Civilians were categorized based on their involvement with the Nazi regime. Example, active participants, supporters, or passive bystanders were the categories, or some of the categories. Punishments varied, but most ordinary Germans faced no severe consequences. They were just deprogrammed, right? They wanted to make sure that this didn't happen in future generations. And apparently they didn't do a good enough job worldwide. Gradual cultural shift. So post-war Germany underwent significant re-education efforts. Schools, media, and cultural institutions promoted democratic values and denounced totalitarianism. Over time, younger generations born after the war embraced this cultural shift and distanced themselves from the Nazi legacy. Cognitive dissonance and denial. While some were successfully deprogrammed, many Germans still clung to the denial or rationalizing to protect themselves from guilt. Imagine how much guilt you would have to feel if you were tricked into supporting a whole regime that did a Holocaust or genocide on an entire race of people. That puts an enormous strain on somebody's soul. So phrases like, "I was just following orders," or "we didn't know," were very common. However, as the horrors became undeniable, some did experience a deep moral reckoning, while others remained resentful or dismissive. So, could this happen with the MAGA movement? There is a strong possibility, but it does depend on what happens now. Again, there was a very short period of time, and we'll go into this in a little bit, that the Nazi regime dismantled democracy in Germany. It was 53 days it took Hitler to dismantle democracy in Germany. You know, with the way things are happening, this could beat Hitler's record. But again, it depends on how things turn out. So, a societal threshold. Like in Nazi Germany, a significant threshold might be reached where the movement's consequences become undeniable, whether through legal accountability, political loss, or just public exposure of harm caused by the movement's rhetoric and policies. This is known as stochastic terrorism in many cases. When you have a big enough platform, you have a responsibility to not provide violent rhetoric or inspire violence. Like when Trump stood up there and said, "Fight like hell," instead of telling the Proud Boys, his little gay army, to stand back and stand by like he did before, he incited violence because he knew they were armed. And he knew they were pissed off. He knew they were there for a hostile takeover. That's what his morning White House report stated to him. They warned him, the Proud Boys are here and armed, and they are planning a hostile takeover of democracy to defend Trump, okay? This is exactly why they were there. This is why you see picture after picture and video after video of identifiable Proud Boy members there and armed, as I've shown you multiple times on different platforms. They were the ones who were leading the insurrection. So to imagine it was some kind of left-wing conspiracy, well, you have to have some kind of evidence for that instead of the regurgitating the talking points of the right wing, which the right-wing conspiracy theorists in Congress, specifically people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, have done. And if you look at some of her other interviews, she's just nuts. She is absolutely nuts. She, when she was being interviewed by somebody who led the group of, I forget what the name of the group was, but they were there to protect Social Security. They go and make sure that every administration, doesn't matter if it's left or right, they make sure every administration protects Social Security benefits, right? And this guy was just there seeing if every member of Congress and every member of Doge would make a commitment to protect Social Security benefits. And Marjorie Taylor Greene said he was a part of some left-wing conspiracy and misleading people, and then threw his papers everywhere. She's totally nuts. And why? Why did she act nuts? Because she doesn't have any response to that very real situation where she's in a party that actually wants to go after your Social Security, but she can't tell the constituents that, or she'll never get voted in again. It's a con. So, cognitive dissonance and deprogramming. We skipped one. So major events. Major events like the January 6th Capitol riot have already sparked cracks in some MAGA support, but a broader reckoning may require more definitive accountability, such as legal convictions or overwhelming evidence of wrongdoing. Cognitive dissonance and deprogramming. Many MAGA adherents may experience cognitive dissonance as their beliefs are contradicted by reality. This could lead to shifts in perspectives, but for some, denial and doubling down on the conspiracy theories will remain a coping mechanism, and we must remain empathetic for these people. Remember, it is extremely disruptive when you're rattled with you rattle the very core of your fundamental belief systems. When something like reality contradicts those belief systems, it is very uncomfortable. And we must remember to be empathetic and sympathetic to people who are in those situations. Brothers and sisters, fellow workers. So public accountability, media campaigns, and education on civic principles will play a crucial role in deprogramming. Cultural shift via generational change. So there will be a cultural shift in the generations to come. As with Nazi Germany, a cultural shift may occur over generations. Younger Americans, less entrenched in MAGA ideology, may lead the way in promoting democratic values and rejecting authoritarianism in the future. And a strong resistance to change. So, unlike post-war Germany, the US lacks the external force, like the Allies, to mandate systemic deprogramming. So this is a big problem and a big difference between our situation and Nazi Germany's situation. So the resistance to accountability, persistent misinformation, and political polarization will make this process more challenging, ladies and gentlemen. So just keep that in mind. It's not a straight apples to apples comparison. We are just trying to analyze the red flags and avoid the atrocities that were committed in the past. Again, if you do not learn history, you are doomed to repeat it. That is an age-old saying, and it is still relevant today. So will there be a snapping out of it, though? While some individuals may experience sudden realizations, deprogramming a large movement often happens gradually and even unevenly. Although, in retrospect, some of the historical changes that we've seen recently that normally happen over an extended period of time have, really been happening at an alarming rate. So faster than any historian would ever be able to predict, because it's simply unprecedented in the speed that things are changing. The speed that our country is crumbling. So while some individuals, like I said, while some individuals may experience a sudden realization, it is going to be harder and it might be an uneven situation to deprogram that larger movement. Some may never fully abandon their beliefs and will instead retreat into smaller, more fringe communities. Others, especially those on the periphery, might disengage when the movement loses its power or credibility. When the ball loses its momentum, so to speak. The key turning points here are going to be when if Trump faces legal consequences or there's a dramatic political loss. So these could be some red flags or for key turning points. These could catalyze change for some, but may also harden beliefs for others. So it is hard to say in the long run. But at the end of the day, we want to be fully accountable with our analysis, so we want to keep track of all of the variables. So the lessons for society: expose the consequences. Okay, just as Germans were exposed to the atrocities of Nazism, MAGA adherents may need to confront the tangible harm caused by the movement, whether through personal stories, legal trials, or policy analysis. So we need to promote accountability and education here. Combating disinformation and promoting civic education can help prevent future authoritarian movements. Focus on generational change. Long-term cultural shifts often depend on educating the next generation while addressing the grievances and fears that fueled the movements in the first place. So what's our key takeaway here? Well, drawing analogies to Nazi Germany underscores the importance of exposing truths, fostering accountability, and promoting cultural and generational healing. While societal deprogramming is a slow and uneven process, history suggests it is possible with sustained effort. So we need that tenacious, sustained effort. Don't give up. The future of MAGA, a historical parallel. Let's take a trip back to post-World War II Germany to understand what might happen to the MAGA movement. Spoiler alert, history didn't exactly repeat itself, but it often rhymes. So Nazi Germany, shock and reckoning. After the war, Germans were forced to confront the atrocities of the Nazi regime. The Allies made civilians visit concentration camps, leading to widespread shock and a moral reckoning. I do have a feeling that one day we might be doing this to Trump supporters if Trump goes through with his atrocious Guantanamo Bay concentration camp idea for immigrants, forcing them to walk through Guantanamo to witness the atrocities they supported. We need to reintegrate these indoctrinated radicals. Reintegrating these indoctrinated radicals is sort of like finding out your favorite uncle was secretly a supervillain. Awkward family dinners for decades. So we're going to skip here to the end because I have to do an intermission quick. Maybe like 20 minutes. A 20-minute intermission, something like that. So we'll do a quick 20-minute intermission, and then we'll move on to my second segment, which is Marx My Words, a segment where I take my analysis a bit deeper and apply it to make direct connections to the past, revelations of the present, and even some predictions for the future. So before we jump into segment 2, though, and the intermission, I just want to remind everybody and take a moment to thank everybody. I want to thank you all who support my Patreon and my YouTube memberships. We received lots of support for expanding our goals and developing zero-point energy in our ABHA coil recycling, our vortex coil system. We've received lots of support and lots of love. And this has been tremendously helpful for helping me get these prototypes in production for the team, the Lightning Thief, before we finally push to commercialize the device for everybody to enjoy. So we really appreciate all the love and support. I cannot overstate how much I appreciate all the Patreon support and all the YouTube membership support. We've received so much love and support. It is ridiculous. And I just love seeing that influx of support for disseminating this kind of forbidden knowledge that everybody deserves to have access to. So I do want to remind everybody that I do have a Patreon. It's Beneficence TV. You just go to Patreon, Beneficence TV. It's linked in the description of this video. And I do have YouTube memberships if you would like to help support the cause here. And we are going to be bringing up Coil Kit's Lab Shop soon, so that will be playing into supporting the opening of Coil Kit's Lab Shop, where we will be rolling out some of that recyclable energy technology for you guys to both to experiment with and benefit for off-the-grid lighting and heating technology that is highly efficient, more so than anything on the market today. and it's not going to cost you a pretty penny. It's not going to break the bank. All of our devices are very cheap. So I just want to make that abundantly clear that everything is open source. It's going to be very close to cost, as close as I can make it. And as our Coil Kits Lab Shop gets more, expands more, we will be bringing down those costs as much as possible because I want these devices in everybody's hands. So with that, I am going to transition into an intermission so that I can get you guys set up for segment 2, which is Marx My Words. Again, it's a segment where I take my analysis a bit deeper and we apply it to make connections to the past, revelations of the present, and even some predictions for the future. Welcome back, everybody, to segment 2 of my Red Pill series. Just a reminder, if anybody hasn't hit the like or subscribe button, now's the chance to do that. Please do that, not at your earliest convenience, but right now. Thank you. It helps out the channel tremendously, just hitting the like button, or commenting, or both. So, Marx My Words is a segment where I take my analysis a bit deeper and apply it to make direct connections to the past, revelations of the present, and even predictions of the future. Welcome back, everybody. It's great to see you. Hey, Lulu, how you doing? Sorry I don't really get a chance to check chat too much when I'm in the middle of my lecture, but I usually check it during and in between the intermission segments, in between the segments, the main segments. So I have 3 segments today. Usually I do a red pill analysis, then I'll do Marx My Words, and then I'll have the ending segment, which is my State of the Union address. So, let's jump into profits, an expose on pseudo-economics. This is something that's very important, but it's something that I've wanted to jump into for a while because you don't know how much crap I get from people sending me videos from people like Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro, and it's pretty much just junk analysis. And we need to talk about this for a minute. So, let me get the window capture. There we go. All right, so let's talk about the people who make pseudo-economics sound like common sense. You know the types: media personalities, influencers, and self-proclaimed experts who package bad ideas as economic wisdom. Jordan Peterson. Excuse me. In the modern political landscape, economic policies are often dictated not by sound financial principles, but by ideological narratives designed to benefit the ruling class. This phenomenon, which we refer to as pseudo-economics, is a powerful tool for justifying policies that consolidate wealth and power while leaving the working class disenfranchised. The role of influencers in pseudo-economics. Let's talk about the role of influencers for a moment. One of the primary drivers of pseudo-economics is the rise of influencers, media personalities, political commentators, and self-proclaimed experts, people who package these misleading ideas as common sense. These figures often lack formal economic training, but have mastered the art of persuasion. They frame austerity, deregulation, and corporate subsidies as necessary sacrifices while downplaying systemic inequality. Many of these influencers work in tandem with big think tanks and corporate-funded organizations that manufacture research to support preordained conclusions. By flooding the media with oversimplified explanations and cherry-picked statistics, they shape public discourse, convincing ordinary citizens that economic suffering is either natural or the fault of personal failings rather than structural issues like stagnant wages. The myth of trickle-down economics is one of these examples. One of the most persistent pseudo-economic theories is trickle-down economics. The belief that tax cuts and deregulation for wealthy individuals will ultimately benefit everybody. Despite decades of evidence to the contrary, influencers and policymakers continue to push this narrative because it justifies policies that favor corporate elites. By presenting it as economic law rather than ideology, they ensure that it remains a cornerstone of policy debates. The normalization of gig work and precarious labor. This is a very dangerous one. So another aspect of pseudo-economics is the glorification of the gig economy and precarious labor. Influencers like Ben Shapiro often present these developments as opportunities for freedom and entrepreneurship, while ignoring the realities of stagnant wages, lack of job security, and eroded labor rights. This narrative shifts the burden onto individuals, suggesting that those who struggle simply need to hustle harder, rather than questioning the systemic forces that create such conditions. Again, this response is akin to asking a slave, "Why aren't you working faster when the whip is cracking harder?" So, manufactured consent and the illusion of choice is another topic of pseudo-economics. By co-opting economic discourse, pseudo-economics creates an illusion of choice where none truly exists. Influencers and corporate-backed media frame policies as the only viable option, erasing alternatives that challenge the status quo. This manufactured consent ensures that even as people experience economic hardships, they remain convinced that the system itself is not to blame. Remember, when all your options are controlled, you really don't have freedom of choice, do you? Pseudo-economics does not thrive in a vacuum, okay? It requires a network of well-funded influencers, think tanks, and media figures who package these misleading narratives into digestible content aimed at the working class. These individuals create a facade of economic expertise while promoting policies that serve the interests of the wealthy at the expense of ordinary people. One of the most prominent figures in this space is Ben Shapiro. Shapiro, backed by billionaire-funded institutes like the Daily Wire and PragerU, presents himself as an intellectual authority on economic issues. However, his arguments often boil down to cherry-picked data and emotionally charged rhetoric designed to pit working-class individuals against each other. He pushes narratives that blame poverty on personal failings rather than systemic issues, downplaying corporate exploitation, wage suppression, and the erosion of workers' protections. Shapiro's strategy is simple, though. Frame economic struggles as a moral and cultural issue rather than a structural one. He often argues that individuals should simply work harder or make better choices, ignoring the real barriers like stagnant wages, skyrocketing cost of living, and corporate consolidation. This messaging serves a dual purpose. It reassures the wealthy that inequality is justified, while convincing workers that their suffering is either natural or self-inflicted. Beyond Shapiro, other figures like Jordan Peterson, Dave Ramsey, and various pundits from Fox News employ similar tactics. They push financial self-help narratives that obscure systemic economic issues, turning legitimate frustrations into culture war distractions. Instead of directing anger at billionaires, monopolies, and exploitative policies, these influencers redirect working-class resentment towards unions, social programs, or even other workers. After all, how can workers from both sides of the political spectrum come together and change things for everybody if they are too busy fighting amongst themselves about trivial culture war issues that have little to no impact on the material conditions of the majority people? The result is a divided working class, too busy arguing amongst personal responsibility narratives and ideological differences to recognize their shared economic struggle. This manufactured division is precisely what allows pseudo-economics to persist and shape public policy in ways that disproportionately benefit the elite. By exposing these tactics and their architects, we can begin to dismantle the myths that keep workers fighting amongst themselves instead of against the system that exploits them. All right, so let's look at some of the architects of pseudo-economics. Ben Shapiro, the master of cherry picking. Shapiro loves to blame poverty on personal failings. Just work harder, he says, ignoring systemic issues like wage suppression or corporate greed. So that's like telling somebody with a flat tire to just drive better instead of fixing the pothole-filled road. That's kind of obvious, right? The real agenda here is Shapiro's narrative serves the wealthy by redirecting working class anger toward culture wars. Instead of uniting against billionaires, we're too busy arguing about pronouns and cancel culture, right? Jordan Peterson, the self-help grifter, okay? He's one of my favorite topics because he is so intelligent when it comes to psychology. But once he strays right into economics and politics, he turns extremely, extremely ignorant, and it shows, and it's very embarrassing to anybody who actually is kind of well-read on these subjects. So Peterson pushes financial self-help narratives that obscure systemic issues. He says, clean your room, while ignoring the fact that the house is on fire. It's like rearranging a deck of chairs on the Titanic. Sure, your room looks nice, bro, but the ship is still sinking. Oh, these grifters. I think they even fool themselves because they make a lot of money. I mean, you know, again, they want to protect their own psyche from the realities that they're a part of the problem, you know. The gig economy, the freedom... is freedom or exploitation, right? That's the question. Well, I would argue it is the latter and not the former. But influencers like Shapiro or Peterson glorify gig work as freedom while ignoring the lack of job security and benefits. That's like calling a hamster wheel a fitness opportunity. Sure, you're moving, but you're not really getting anywhere. Oh, so the takeaway here is don't fall for the grift. These influencers are funded by millionaires and billionaires to keep us divided. They're not here to help you. They're here to sell you a narrative that benefits the elite. And we have an example of irresponsible investing here, and I will do an expose on that in a moment. So let's look a moment at this irresponsible pseudo-economics. And this is a smaller channel that I found, and it's unfortunate, that is giving an argument basically defending the External Revenue Service. So I will do my expose in a moment, but let's just take a look at this for a moment, just a few minutes.
Let's talk about a bold, controversial new proposal that's been making waves in Washington. Trump's External Revenue Service, the ERS. It's a move that's sparking heated debates, with supporters praising its innovative approach to trade and taxation, and critics calling it an overreach and inefficient. But what does it mean for you, your finances, and the economy at large? Let's dive in. First, let's take a moment to understand tariffs. A tariff is essentially a tax imposed by a government on goods and services imported from other countries. The primary purpose of tariffs are to generate revenue for the government and and to protect domestic industries by making imported goods more expensive, thereby encouraging consumers to buy locally produced products. Now, historically, tariffs have been a significant tool in shaping trade policies, and they've played crucial roles in the economic development strategies of many nations. In the early history of the United States, tariffs were a primary source of federal revenue, funding government operations and infrastructure projects. There wasn't even an income tax at the time. For instance, the Tariff Act of 1789 was one of the first major pieces of legislation passed by Congress, aiming to protect burgeoning American industries and foreign competition and to generate revenue for the federal government. Over time, the reliance on tariffs decreased with the introduction of income taxes, but they've remained a tool for economic policy and protectionism. So, what is the External Revenue Service, or the ERS? Simply put, it's a proposal to create an agency separate from the IRS. Its primary goal would be to manage and enforce tariffs, fees placed on imported goods. According to Trump's team, this new agency aims to streamline the tariff process, increasing revenue, and reduce Americans' reliance on foreign goods. Supporters of the ERS argue that tariffs can be a powerful tool to boost domestic industries and generate significant revenue without directly increasing taxes on individuals. By targeting foreign import, the ERS would essentially shift some of the tax burden overseas, encouraging American-made products and potentially bringing back more manufacturing jobs to the US. For example, Trump's team claims that a 10% tariff on import goods could generate hundreds of billions of dollars annually. Supporters like Senator Bernie Moreno have even introduced bills to fund the initiative, emphasizing its potential to protect American workers and restore fairness to international trade. One of the additional arguments in favor of the ERS is the potential for increased self-sufficiency. By reducing reliance on imports, the US could strengthen its supply chains and ensure greater stability during global disruptions, like pandemics or geopolitical conflicts. Supporters argue that this kind of resilience is not just an economic benefit, but a national security imperative. Another positive aspect being discussed is how the ERS could provide a predictable and consistent revenue stream that isn't tied to income or even corporate taxes. This could be particularly beneficial in times of economic downturn when things are slowing down, when traditional tax revenues might decrease. With tariffs providing a steady income, the federal government could avoid taking on more debt, issuing more bonds, or introducing emergency taxes. Trump's prior tariff proposals provide some context for the new initiative. During his first term in office, he implemented a series of tariffs, particularly targeting Chinese imports, as part of his America First economic policy. The goal was to reduce U.S. trade deficit and encourage domestic manufacturing. These actions led to what was commonly referred to as the U.S.-China trade war. Now, in his second term, in his first few days of office, Trump has proposed even more extensive tariff measures, such as a 25% tariff on goods from Canada and Mexico, which he claimed alongside the ERS would generate significant revenue for the U.S. His administration emphasized tariffs as crucial for boosting domestic manufacturing and reducing illegal activities such as drug trafficking. To understand the potential industry-specific impacts, let's consider a few examples. The steel and aluminum sectors, long at the heart of the U.S. manufacturing base, could see significant benefits as tariffs make imported alternatives less competitive. I mean, look at Pittsburgh. It used to be the steel capital. This could lead to more domestic production and job creation in those industries. However, industries relying on imported components such as electronics and automotive manufacturing might face higher costs, potentially passing those costs on to consumers, raising the cost of goods. Internationally, countries like Japan and South Korea have used tariff strategies in the past to develop key industries, and some supporters argue that the ERS could replicate similar success in the US. However, critics warn that the global trade environment today is far more interconnected, and unilateral tariff increases might provoke retaliation that wasn't as likely in earlier periods of economic development. Public sentiment on tariffs varies widely. Some Americans view them as patriotic tools to protect jobs and industries, while others see them as hidden taxes that disproportionately affect middle and lower income households. Polls on Trump's prior tariff measurements showed a split in opinions, often along party lines, but there was also significant agreement on the need for fairer trade practices. Transitioning to a tariff-focused revenue system could also bring some challenges. Businesses would likely need time to adjust their supply chains and pricing strategies. And consumers might experience some sticker shock, especially at first, before those supply chains come online, as prices rise on imported goods. However, supporters suggest that over time, the economy could stabilize and even grow stronger as domestic industries adapt and thrive. There's also the possibility for innovation within the ERS. Supporters envision the agency utilizing advanced technologies like AI and blockchain to effectively enforce tariffs, track compliance, and minimize fraud. Such innovations could potentially make the ERS a model for modern revenue collection and enforcement agencies worldwide. But not everyone's on board. Critics warn that tariffs function like a hidden tax on consumers. When companies have to pay more to import goods, they often pass those costs right along to you, the buyer, in the form of higher prices. That's especially concerning when inflation is still fresh in everyone's minds. Household budgets are already tight, and this could stretch them even further. There's also the question of how other countries will respond. There could be tariff wars. Tariffs can lead to trade wars, with countries retaliating by imposing their own tariffs on American goods. That can hurt exporters, including farmers and manufacturing, that rely on selling their products abroad. Some experts worry that the ERS could spark more economic tension globally and destabilize already fragile trade relationships. Now, on the flip side, supporters argue that these trade tensions could open the door for negotiated trade deals that are more favorable to the US. By creating leverage through tariffs, proponents claim that the ERS could help the US secure better terms with trading partners, leveling the playing field for American businesses. From a financial perspective, this initiative could have ripple effects. Tariffs might push up the cost of goods, which could drive inflation even higher. For investors, that might mean even more volatility in the stock market, especially in sectors like retail and manufacturing. Now, on the other hand, if the ERS succeeds in making American products more competitive, we could see long-term growth in domestic industries and a healthier trade balance. There's also the administrative cost to consider. Setting up a new agency like the ERS isn't cheap, and critics argue it could duplicate work being done already by the IRS and other government bodies, other three-letter agencies. The question becomes, does the potential revenue justify the expense? Supporters counter that the ERS could actually reduce inefficiencies in the long run by creating a specialized agency focused solely on tariffs. They argue that enforcement could become more effective, reducing loopholes and ensuring that all applicable revenues are collected. This could be a boon for federal revenue without placing additional burdens on taxpayers. One key point to note is how this proposal is being framed politically. Trump's team is selling it as a patriotic move to strengthen American economy and independence. That message resonates with a lot of people who feel left behind by globalization. But opponents see it as a populist play that oversimplifies the complexities of international trade and taxation. As always, the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. There's definitely pros and cons with everything. For now, the ERS is still a proposal, and it faces significant hurdles before becoming reality. Congress will need to debate, amend, and potentially approve it, so
that right there, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, is not always true. That is another logical fallacy. It's called the false dichotomy, okay? So we have to remember that there could be a spectrum
to hear more about this
of different possibilities, or that something could inherently just be bad, right? So we are going to jump into my expose on the External Revenue Service and why it's a terrible idea. All right, so let me make sure everything's okay. So the External Revenue Service, as proposed by Donald Trump, would be a deceptive rebranding of protectionist tariffs that actually shift the burden onto the working class while disguising it as an economic boost. So let's break down how it's misleading and why it ultimately serves capitalist interest rather than the people. Tariffs as a hidden tax on workers. The idea that tariffs generate revenue without raising taxes is a sleight of hand. Businesses don't just absorb tariffs. They pass them on to the consumer through higher prices. That's how it works. That means workers, not foreign companies, end up footing the bill. The working class is already struggling with inflation, and adding artificial price hikes only makes things worse. Nationalism over class interest. The framing of tariffs as patriotic plays into nationalist rhetoric rather than addressing class struggles. A Marxist analysis sees the working class as international, not just American. Encouraging domestic manufacturing through tariffs doesn't change the fact that capitalists will still exploit labor, whether in the US or abroad. The focus should be on democratizing production, not just shifting exploitation around. The state revenue without structural change issue. Okay, the External Revenue Service is pitched as an alternative revenue source, implying it could replace income or corporate taxes entirely. But without class struggle to redistribute wealth, this just reinforces the capitalist state control. The government is still extracting revenue in a way that disproportionately impacts the working class while avoiding direct taxation of the wealthy. We have an artificial economic nationalism and retaliation issue. Okay, the claim that the External Revenue Service would bring back jobs ignores how global supply chains work. If the US imposes heavy tariffs, other countries retaliate, leading to trade wars, as the video did note, that disrupt economies further. And even if some industries return, corporations will still automate jobs, cut wages, and lobby against labor rights. That's always been the fact. Without workers' control, domestic manufacturing won't benefit the proletariat. It'll just enrich capitalists in different industries. We have an illusion of economic sovereignty. The idea that tariffs make the U.S. self-sufficient is very misleading. True economic independence would require worker-owned industries and the decommodification of basic needs, not just making imports more expensive. Capitalists will seek the cheapest labor possible, whether that's through loopholes, deregulation, or crushing unions. So ultimately, the ERS is just another way for capitalists to maintain control while shifting economic burdens onto working class under the guise of fair trade and national security. A real Marxist approach wouldn't just tweak the tax code, it would dismantle the system that exploits workers in the first place, democratize the enterprise, make the workers part owner of the business. You eliminate the their employee-employer contradiction. Remember, the employee and the employer are at odds. They always have a contradicting agenda. If you eliminate that contradiction, then you make the business more efficient and less exploitative, right? I mean, technically, unless you eliminate capitalism 100% around the world, you would still be forced to interact with capitalist exploitative abusers. And in that way, you would still have to participate in exploitation to some extent. But internally, the business, you wouldn't be exploiting people. You would be agreeing on everything in a democratic workplace. So that is the difference. In conclusion, pseudo-economics is not merely bad policy, it's a deliberate ideological weapon used to justify inequality. By exposing the tactics used by influencers, media figures, and think tanks, we can begin to dismantle the narratives that uphold economic injustice and reclaim a discourse grounded in reality rather than propaganda. So next time you hear someone like Shapiro or Peterson, ask yourself, who benefits from me believing this? The next segment we have is on the 53 days to dictatorship that we saw in Nazi Germany or post-World War II Germany. So the phase one, this is very scary, by the way, but it's important to emphasize in parallel with what's going on today. So phase one was the seizing of power. The capitalist class enables fascism to crush the left. On January 30th, 1933, Hitler becomes chancellor, appointed by President Paul von Hindenburg under pressure from right-wing elites. German capitalists and conservative supporters to the Nazis smash workers' movements and prevent socialist revolution. Now, this is important. Remember that old saying, I did not speak out, and they came for the socialists, but I was not a socialist, so I didn't speak out. And then they came for me. Yeah, they came for the socialists first. They came for the communists first, before they came for the Jewish people. Remember that. They came for the well-organized and ready to defend democracy. So February 1st, 1933, the Reichstag dissolved. The Reichstag, or the German parliament, was dismissed to prepare for new elections. Nazis pushed propaganda, blaming economic crises on communist Jews and internal enemies. Phase 2, manufactured crises. Okay, so fascism as a counter-revolutionary weapon. February 27, 1933, the Reichstag fire. The Reichstag building, or the Germans' parliament, is set on fire. Dutch communist Marinus van der Lubbe arrested, likely framed. Nazis use the fire as an excuse to claim a communist uprising is imminent. February 28, 1933, the Reichstag fire decree. The crackdown begins. Hindenburg signs an emergency decree stripping away civil rights. Freedom of speech, press, and assembly is abolished. Communists, the KPD, and socialists, the SPD, are arrested en masse. Trade union officers raided. Leftist newspapers shut down. 10,000 communists jailed in days, including Ernest Thälmann, KPD leader. The concentration camps, like Dachau, are first filled with socialists and communists, not yet Jews. Phase 3, legal coup. State becomes a fascist instrument. March 5th, 1933, Reichstag elections rigged against the left. Nazis win 43.9%, not a majority, but with allies, they control parliament. Communist deputies, KPD, are banned from taking their seats, ensuring Nazi dominance. March 23rd, 1933, Enabling Act, democracy ends, dictatorship begins. Passing in a Reichstag without communist opposition, SPD still resists, but is powerless. So the socialists still resist, but are still powerless. This gives Hitler total legislative power. Parliament no longer needed. SPD leader Otto Wels makes the last anti-fascist speech in the Reichstag. How fascism crushes the left before other enemies. So why socialists and communists first? Well, they were the only real opposition to Nazi rule. Jews were demonized later. Early Nazi policy focused on economic discrimination. Trade unions absorbed into the Nazi-controlled German Labor Front, May 1933. SPD outlawed in June 1933, KPD already banned by then. July 1933, Germany is a one-party state, Nazis only. So what's the takeaway here? Well, fascism is a last resort of capitalism. Big business propped up by Hitler to destroy the socialist threat. Okay? The state serves class interests. Once the ruling class aligns with fascists, democracy is soon by discarded. So the lesson here is that the left was divided. The KPD and SPD, the socialists and communists, were divided and failed to unite, allowing Nazis to pick them off before turning to other enemies. So who were the KPD and SPD in the situation of America? Well, they're the working class, the different working class. We have right now in that parallel, working class people divided on the left and the right. We have Democrats and Republicans fighting amongst each other as workers. And that's a big problem, because if we're going to defeat fascism, both parties, the working class of both those parties and other parties need to unite in a common front. So now we have something a little more interesting in Marx My Words. We have the gospel according to labor. Sweat, tears, and dirty money. Let's take a detour into something unexpected. The intersection of Marxism and the teachings of Jesus. Yes, you heard right. Marx and Jesus. Two guys who probably wouldn't have agreed on theology, but would have definitely seen eye to eye on their shared disdain for exploitation and greed. Sweat money. So what is sweat money? Well, the currency of exploitation. Sweat money is the profit squeezed out of somebody else's labor. Think about that $5 t-shirt you bought. It's cheap, right? But someone somewhere is working 12 hours a day in a factory for pennies to make it. That's sweat money. It's like your boss taking credit for your hard work at the company picnic, except it's happening on a global scale. So Jesus said, "The laborer deserves his wage." Luke 10:7. He didn't say the worker deserves to scrape by while the CEO buys a third vacation home. Today's economic system often mirrors this form of corruption. When wealth is hoarded by the few while the workers struggle, Jesus' message behind "the laborers deserve his wage" aligns with this. Everyone deserves fair compensation for their work, not just CEOs who profit from the system. If Jesus was around today, he'd probably flip over a few boardroom tables. So the funny context of this is during the cleansing of the temple. This is according to historical context. During the cleansing of the temple, Jesus flipped over the tables in the temple to challenge the exploitation happening in a sacred space. This is true. In the temple, money changers exploited worshipers by charging inflated prices and fees, turning a sacred space into a marketplace. Like Malcolm X, Jesus displayed righteous anger. So what is tier money? Well, the profits of suffering. Tier money is the wealth extracted from pain and despair. Think payday loans with 400% interest rates, or Big Pharma charging $300 for insulin. It's evil. It's evil, just plain and simple. It's really like a vending machine that charges you $10 for a bottle of water when you're dying of thirst in the desert. Slap to the face. In Matthew 25:40, Jesus said, "Whatever you did for one of the least of these, you did for me." Exploiting someone's suffering, that's like slapping Jesus in the face. Don't slap Jesus in the face. Blood money. So what is blood money? Well, blood money is the cost of life. We've seen a lot of repercussions of this recently with the accused assassin of this United Healthcare CEO. So blood money is profit soaked in death. War profiteers, fossil fuel companies, and corporations with deadly labor practices. Even your 401k might be funding this stuff without you realizing it. And it's sad. So it's like buying a lottery ticket with somebody else's life savings, except the lottery is rigged and you're the one losing. Marx thought that all value comes from labor. So when billionaires hoard wealth, they're essentially stealing the value created by workers, you. It's not just unfair, it's theft. The common thread here for class struggles is noted by zooming out. Sweat, tears, and blood. They're all extracted from the same source, the working class. Whether it's your labor, your suffering, or your very life, the capitalist system thrives on turning people into commodities. This is where Marx comes in. He taught us to recognize that the value of anything comes from labor. Jesus, in this way, taught the same. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? Mark 8:36. Capitalism has forfeited its soul, folks, and it's long past time for us to reclaim what is ours. So the path forward is a revolution of love and justice. What do we do about all this? First, we educate ourselves and others. Recognize the system at play. Tear down the false narratives that equates wealth with morality. Second, we organize, whether that's unions, community groups, or just talking to your neighbor about these issues. And finally, we demand change. Not just policy tweaks, but a fundamental restructuring of society. And here's where we end with a bit of hope. The fight against dirty money, whether sweat, tears, or blood, isn't just a political struggle. It's a moral one. It's about the very essence of what it means to be human. And when we fight for justice, we're not just following Marx or Jesus. We're honoring the sacred dignity of every person who's ever labored, suffered, or sacrificed for a better world. So educate yourself and others. Recognize the systems at play. Organize, whether it's unions, community groups, or just talking to your neighbor, and demand change. It's like fixing a leaky roof. You can keep patching it, or you can rebuild the whole house. It's up to you. Luke 14:12. Then Jesus said to his host, "When you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers, your sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they might invite you back, and so you will be repaid. But when you have a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." Proverbs 22:22 and 23. Do not exploit the poor because they are poor, and do not crush the poor in court, for the Lord will take up their case and exact a life for a life. Proverbs 14, verse 31. Whoever oppresses the poor shows contempt for their maker. Whoever is kind to the needy honors God. John 3:17. If anyone has material possessions but sees a brother or sister in need, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with truth and action. James 2, verse 2 through 4. Suppose a man comes into your meeting wearing a gold ring and fine clothes, and then a poor man in filthy clothes comes in. If you show special attention to the man wearing fine clothes and say, "Here's a good seat for you," but you say to the poor man, "You sit there at my feet," have you not discriminated amongst yourself and become judges with evil thoughts? And thus is the word, marks my word. All right, so moving into the segment 3 is my State of the Union address. We are going to take a brief intermission and transition over to segment 3 while I address chat and get segment 3 ready for everybody.
I was a dumbass, voted for Trump. It was the worst decision I ever made.
I've seen the light, and I got out of MAGA. A lot of us there have seen the light. We have deep regrets.
I feel guilty because I voted for Trump twice. I feel very guilty because I feel responsible. That's why he's still running.
I used to be a MAGA Republican, and now I've turned blue.
And it makes me emotional to know that I ever fucking stood by idly and blind and let that shit happen.
Because I know that I have been a Trump supporter, and I can no longer say that I am MAGA. And
I regret my vote for Trump.
I voted for Trump. I'm done. I have I don't have any more resilience.
Yeah, you can only teach somebody who wants to be taught.
I can't believe I have to say this, but
you're right.
I'm no longer rocking with Trump. Dude, I was the first Gen Zer to support Trump. I definitely preferred him in 2016 and to some degree 2020. I was with Trump for 9 straight years, 2016 to today. I didn't vote for him in 2024, actually, thank God. But what happened between me and the employee who told me about the new policy change for giving free water, man, I'm disappointed. I'm very disappointed in Trump right now. we would have been way better off with JD Vance or Butch Ware or Candace Owens, but we got Trump, and we know Trump for who he is. He's a corporate shill. He's imposed tariffs. That's not a conservative move. That's not even a nationalist or imperialist move. That's worse than imperialist. It's a feudalist neocon move. And Trump, I hope you know better. I should have boycotted Starbucks in October of 2023, but I didn't because I was stupid as hell. Today, I'm going to sell my Trump stock, and I'm also going to be boycotting Starbucks moving forward.
Yeah, we voted for Trump in 2016, 2020, and 2024. We live in the Florida Panhandle, and we thought that this would be good for our business, but we're finding out now that we were wrong, and I want to publicly say that we are regretting our votes at this point. My husband and me own a construction company, and we literally do not have workers anymore. Most of our workers are from Mexico, and they're good, hard workers. I talked to a few of them, and they said they were just too scared to come back to work because of all the raids. Our construction company is likely to go out of business now, and we don't know what we're going to do, but we're never voting for a Republican again. Ron DeSantis and Trump have been passing laws that negatively affect our business, and I just want to say that I'm sorry for voting for him. I grew up Republican, and it's all I've ever known, but now I can see that me and my whole family have been very wrong about this. So we hope that 2026 comes and we can take back the House and the Senate and stop him from what he's doing. There's a special election coming up in Matt Gaetz's district, and we're going to do everything we can to advocate for a Democrat taking that seat.
Is anyone else's head spinning right now at everything Trump's doing? He's cutting this program, he's firing these people, he's renaming oceans, and something I never expected, he's now taking control of Gaza? How is that even possible? Is that something he can do? Just say, I want to take control of Gaza? And how does that play out for the end time scenario? I have so many questions, but one of the top ones is, when does this man sleep? Does he ever sleep? I mean, really, what could be coming next? And what is America gonna look like at the end of this 4 years? This man has done more in 3 weeks than Biden did in all of his term. I'm definitely curious to see what's gonna come next. And once his picks get confirmed and get busy working, I'm curious to see what they're gonna do. I also heard that Trump is planning on going to the Super Bowl. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I don't think anybody should be going to large events right now, but definitely not our president. Like, he should just sit his butt at home, maybe play a round of golf or something, but stay away from the Super Bowl.
I might lose my farm because of the government.
No, because of who you voted for.
NRCS, conservation planning. So they had a program out there called the EQIP program.
That's a great program. And Joe Biden's Inflation Reduction Act provided $60 billion to that program. But the person you voted for froze those funds. So what happened?
He got a contract with them for $240,000. So called me today and said, hey, I know we have this signed contract. We're reneging on it.
That sucks for you. But again, with all these people that regret voting for Donald Trump, we don't feel bad. This was laid out in Project 2025. We warned everyone, but y'all didn't want to believe us. And so because you voted for Donald Trump, you're at risk of losing your farm.
I had this contract. I made business decisions based on this contract.
Then you should have done more research. But what sucks the most is the farmers that did the research and voted for Kamala. Those are the ones we feel bad about.
But I don't understand how you can sign a contract and then just renege on that contract. I do not.
It hasn't even been 3 weeks yet. And so many people are in the find out stage. Next time there's an election, just do more research.
Are y'all really this pathetic? You really are trying to make leaving MAGA a thing, as if anybody's really leaving MAGA? Listen, it's like such sore losers that you all are trying so hard to make somebody regret voting for Donald Trump. Let me tell you something. I don't know not one person who regretted voting for Donald Trump, okay? I know a lot of people that regret voting for Kamala Harris. To be honest, some of these people are even celebrities. Charlamagne, Stephen A. Smith even say he felt like a fool voting for Kamala Harris. But why are y'all trying so hard to make leaving MAGA really a thing? Y'all are so desperate. It looks such a pathetic attempt that you all just bringing everything up, try to pull anything out of your ass. Like nothing is working for y'all. It's just a complete embarrassment. And wish y'all would just realize it, that nobody regret voting for Donald Trump. The reason why we can tell you the reason why we voted for Donald Trump. Because what he campaigned on, and exactly what Donald Trump is doing, is exactly what he campaigned on. We're happy. We're cheering for it. But can nobody that actually voted for Kamala Harris tell me why they voted for Kamala Harris without mentioning Donald Trump's name? So it makes it, we're happy, we're cheering. There's no such thing as a hashtag Leave It MAGA since it's supposed to be trending now. I don't know why y'all keep making up this nonsense. You lost. Accept it. Leave us alone. We're having a blast. We're celebrating. We have not stopped celebrating.
Well, wouldn't you know? So now you're finding out that Americans, you voted for Trump there, you're finding out that you may not get your Christmas bonuses because of the tariffs, because your employers are going to need to, quote-unquote, stock up on supplies before the tariffs kick in. Ooh, people have been explaining what tariffs are for a long time now. Democrats have been trying to tell you it's a bad idea. FAFO.
Hey y'all, so I've been seeing it float around that there are some MAGAs who actually do regret voting the way that they did. And what I have to say about that is good. Because honestly, the more you regret the thing that you've done, the more uncomfortable it is for you to sit with it, the more likely you are to remember this for next time. Maybe you're finally going to admit to yourself, I was wrong. Maybe you're finally going to admit to yourself, other people were right. Maybe you're going to admit to yourself, I made a huge mistake. I never should have done that. Maybe you will finally admit to yourself, I got taken in. I fell for a con. Maybe also you will admit to yourself that you don't care about anyone or anything unless it directly involves you. Maybe you'll finally admit that all of the people who were fighting for the cushy life that you had been living are the exact people whose lives you voted against. Maybe you'll finally realize how complacent you'd become. And maybe you'll finally realize, yeah, you know what? I actually was/am racist. Maybe you'll finally admit that you had been living with bigotry and racism up until that point, or maybe even now still. And maybe you're going to finally realize that what we're all facing now, you included, is not how we want to live. So yes, good. Regret it. Be uncomfortable. Sit with that, because nobody's going to have any sympathy for you. You're going to sit with that all alone, and you're going to have to face some hard truths. And I really hope that this experience changes you for the better. Because honestly, if it doesn't, then you kind of truly are a lost cause. Meanwhile, everybody else, what do we get to say? I told you so.
So I'm in Walgreens, and there's this guy in front of me who's all decked out in his MAGA gear. The one with the daddy's home, you know, with the fist in the air. Anyway, he's there with his MAGA hat on and his Trump shirt, and he's getting his prescriptions. So the lady behind the counter that's helping him lets him know, sir, I've noticed that you have TRICARE as your insurance, and I'm just letting you know you should be getting a letter in the mail that we are no longer going to be contracted through them at the end of this month. He said, what do you mean? We got Selfridge right down the road. What do you mean you ain't going to be contracted through no veterans insurance? And she said, sir, There are a whole lot of administrative changes that are going to be going on, and Walgreens, the company, is unsure of what contracts through the VA, what contracts for the military are going to be revised or pulled. She says, now, I'm sure there are other pharmacies such as CVS or mail-in pharmacies such as Express Scripts that will still honor your insurance. But as far as Walgreens, we will not. And boy, did this man get so mad. He didn't understand what was going on. So she broke down to him what was happening. She's like, you know, he's talking about getting rid of VA hospitals. He's getting rid of possibly disability for veterans. Or putting a 10-year max cap on that, and it's going to be an extremely hard process to even be approved for that. So this guy, he's just like staring at her, and he goes, well, shit, I don't know what I'm going to do. He said, you know, the only thing that I live off of right now is my VA and my Social Security. And she just kind of looked at him, and I looked at him, and I said, they're going to be taking your Social Security too. And I looked down at his shirt, and I looked back up at him. I said, you know, from one veteran to another, Daddy doesn't give a fuck if you have your medicine or not. He really doesn't. He doesn't care that you served. He deferred his freaking draft 4 times because his feet hurt. I mean, what do you expect from the guy? Well, Republicans are supposed to be all about their military. I said, this is not about Republicans and Democrats, sir. There's Republicans, there's Democrats, and then there's MAGA. And I said, and unfortunately, you're all a part of the MAGA. I said, hey, you voted for him. You fucked around, and now you're gonna find out. And I kind of feel bad because his face was just so like this was the first time he ever heard this. This was the first time he was ever hearing that as a veteran, his benefits, his security is being threatened. That his Social Security is being threatened. Like, where the fuck are these people staying? Where are they at? Like, living under a rock? I don't get it. But anyway, that's my story.
You know, at the end of the day, with all of MAGA figuratively shoving our nose in our own shit like we're dogs in order to feel superior about Trump winning the election, I actually pity this man that she's talking about. And here's the thing. We have no idea what's going to happen. And I'm a veteran. My parents are veterans. I'm a military brat through and through. And now veterans' options are going to be severely limited, as if vets don't have a hard enough time already. There's a lot of consequence that comes from the results of elections and the words that comes out of politicians' mouths during these elections. It kind of reminds me of this debate I was having with somebody recently who was saying, don't worry about mass deportations. That's not going to happen. He doesn't have the power to do that. It was just a ploy. It was a talking point or whatever. Well, that remains to be seen. And beyond that, he appears to be doubling down. It's going to have massive implications for our economy. And even if that never happened, which it's looking like it is, just the fact that it has been used as a part of his political strategy is going to have, and has had, demonstrable consequences in our communities. The same way that his Project 2025 initiative that he pretended to not know anything about, and everyone looked the other way, is going to have massive implications. If I've said it once, I've said it twice, and I've said it thrice. Having zero scope of what your iconic billionaire leader is proposing in his policies simply because he loathes the same groups of people that you do is the ultimate fuck around and find out karma that you are about to receive.
Are my MAGA family regretting their decisions? No, they're celebrating. They're celebrating the deportations. Yeah.
I'm going to have to put on my fucking double-seeing glasses because I can't even begin to see the amount of bullshit coming from you.
I do not like the song. Santa Claus is coming to town. Do not come to my town.
People are starting to realize that,
All right, welcome back.
We might have made him.
Welcome back. Give me 1 second to. All right. Welcome back to the Red Pill series for our final segment, my State of the Union address. So if you haven't hit the like and subscribe button, please do that. It really helps out the algorithm with our channel. And if you would like to help fund our channel's goals in disseminating some of this forbidden knowledge and help fund my 0 Point Energy research, you can do that with the links in the description, my Patreon, and you can subscribe to my YouTube members only. I will actually be, I think we have 5 to give out, so I might give out 5 of my membership subscriptions to YouTube for free to you guys in a few moments. So we might do a special giveaway. I believe I have 5 left. Let me just double check real quick. Yes, we do. We have 5 free memberships to gift out this month for everybody. So stay tuned. And after my State of the Union address segment, we will be giving out those 5 free memberships for you guys. Hey, what's going on, Mitchell? I appreciate you. You are awesome too, man. You guys are all awesome. We have the best chat in the entire world. Our community is probably one of the best in the entire YouTube, in the entirety of YouTube. So let's move into my State of the Union address. So, Trump halts all federal spending to prepare for a tax rape of our working class as egg prices continue to skyrocket.
This morning, another sweeping action by President Trump as he remakes the federal government in his first full week in office.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Overnight, NBC News learning that the White House has ordered a freeze of federal aid starting at 5 p.m. today.
There is now a temporary hold on all programs related to DEI, the Green New Deal, and foreign aid assistance. Also, the president signed 4 executive orders focused on the military, which include eliminating diversity programs and setting in motion a potential future ban on transgender troops.
On the one hand, supporters of President Trump are out there saying, as you just showed in a clip, this was the point. We elected him to shake things up and to challenge the assumptions of Washington. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is that dollars that come from Washington to our communities, to our schools, to our senior centers, to our police departments and fire companies are being frozen so that money stays here in Washington so that Trump can spend it in expanded tax cuts later this year. That's exactly what they're discussing at the Doral Golf Resort in Florida right now.
Okay. Let me close that out. So, WTF is happening? What the F is happening? Trump stages another coup.
We know when the people turn out. There are 300+ million of us. And there's one Elon Musk and his 5 pimply college students. No fucking way does this guy get to take away the United States from us. I'm gonna leave you with a video here at the end from somebody in Congress who does care. And I hope you will take the information from this video, do some investigating, and start acting. You are capable. This is your country. What you do now does matter.
Thanks very much for joining me. We are living in a dangerous and unprecedented moment in American history. And I'm getting a lot of calls from people who are not only upset about what's happening, but are wondering how we best go forward. Well, let me tell you. We've got to be smart, we've got to be organized, and we've got to fight back. This is not a time for wallowing in despair and hiding under the covers. The stakes are just too high. We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for our kids, for future generations. We're fighting for the future of this planet. In the first 2 weeks of his presidency, Donald Trump defied the Constitution by ending birthright citizenship, fired government watchdogs, allowed drilling along our coastlines, pardoned violent insurrectionists, suspended all foreign aid, and tried to cut off virtually all federal funding. So, how do we go forward? First, to be effective, we've got to understand what, in fact, is happening around us right now. Second, we need a short-term strategy. What do we do tomorrow and the next day and the day after that? Third, we need a long-term strategy. How do we build a movement that gains political power? Here is, in my view, a brief overview as to what is happening under Trump. Most importantly, the move toward oligarchy in our country, government run by the rich and the powerful, is proceeding rapidly. And it's not being done secretly. A little over a week ago, Donald Trump was inaugurated for his second term. Standing right behind him were the three richest men in the world, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Mark Zuckerberg. Men who have become over $200 billion richer since Trump was elected and who now are worth almost $1 trillion more money than the bottom half of American society, 170 million people. But it's not just oligarchy that we should worry about. This country under Trump is moving rapidly toward authoritarianism. Just a few examples. In violation of the Constitution and federal law, Trump attempted the other day to suspend all federal grants and loans. That means he blocked funding for Medicaid, Head Start, food stamps, homeless veterans, etc., etc. Tens of millions of Americans, some of the most vulnerable people in our country, were impacted by that decision. Fortunately, Americans all across the country stood up in outrage.
So I just want to make it a point here that it's one thing to want to dismantle these systems because you don't think they work and you want to enact something that does work, but he's dismantling them and he doesn't have a damn thing planned or lined up to help these most vulnerable people who need the food stamps. What are you going to do about food stamps? He's just dismantling them and he doesn't have a replacement for it. So I think that's telling in its own right. So if you're still on the fence about this, just think about it for a moment. He's dismantling these systems, but he doesn't really have a plan to replace them with anything.
And said no, no. And with the help of the courts, much, but not all of that freeze in funding was rescinded. You may have noticed that Trump is intimidating the media with lawsuits against ABC, CBS, Meta, and the Des Moines Register. If Trump does not like what media reports, he is threatening them with lawsuits, undermining the First Amendment. That is a direct movement toward authoritarianism. Now, that's a very broad overview of where we are today. In terms of short-term strategy, we've got to mobilize as strongly as we can against Trump's dangerous proposals. And let me just say this, importantly. Yes, the Republicans control the House and the Senate, but do not forget their majorities are small. In the House, a body of 435 members, they have a 4-vote majority. That is a razor-thin margin, and their legislation can be defeated. There are a number of Republicans out there who won in Democratic districts by small margin. So let me tell you.
That's right. So if they don't want to get replaced next political campaign season, they have to abide by their constituents. Now, whether they will or not is up to debate. But that's the theory, the game plan, as it were, strategy.
These guys do respond to phone calls and emails. So if there's a piece of legislation you disagree with, get on the phone and call the Capitol switchboard at 202-224-2131.
Elijah says, I like how things are finally being shook. I come to bring the sword. It's evidence how broken the system is. System of resilience. Yeah, the system. well, it's teetering. You know, it's teetering on the edge of imploding and succumbing to its internal contradictions, as it were. You know, as I've said many times, you can only rebuild the house of cards so many times. You can only glue it together, so to speak, before it finally sets on fire and you have to replace the whole thing. So all right. First clip, Trump admits he's a in this clip, Trump admits he's a dictator. Probably started out as a Freudian slip, in my opinion, and his charisma just took over from there. No need to think about what he's actually said here, ladies and gentlemen, but, you know, that's what he would tell you.
He says, you're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one. We're closing the border. He says, you're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one. We're closing the... He says, you're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one. We're closing the border, and we're drilling. After that, I'm not...
Yep, that's the answer. Drill, baby, drill. When we know, as fringe scientists, that the real solution is recycling energy and utilizing energy from the vacuum. So, you know, that's laughable and dangerous. So Musk laughs at the idea of using his money for evil. This is another, like, terrifying... a friend sent this to me, and I watched the interview. I hate Bill Maher, but I watched it because I just wanted to do the research, and I love seeing how some people that I don't like interview other people. And this was an interview with Elon Musk on Bill Maher's show. And just his response was very eerie and creepy. And it's chock full of red flags when you're trying to read, like, micro expressions and his body language. So just keep that in mind. If you've seen my short on micro expressions, I might actually link you to it in a moment. But I do have a short video about 10, 11 minutes long that breaks down micro expressions and stuff like that, and how they can be a little telling if somebody's trying to be deceptive.
They do.
Yeah. And you seem to laugh it off, which I think is fantastic. I love it that you have a sense of humor, because a guy as important as you, who makes changes, could use your powers for evil and not good.
Thanks, Paul. Paul says he loves my work.
You could.
I really appreciate that, Paul. That means a lot.
Of course, I would never use them for evil. That's
no, I
crazy.
know.
Rewind that.
Not good. The fact that...
absolutely.
You could. For evil, and a guy as important as you, who makes changes, could use your powers for evil and not good. The fact that...
absolutely.
You could.
I would, of course, I would, never use them for evil. That's
no, I
crazy.
know. But the way...
And he kind of laughs off in a very sarcastic way, hinting that he's being playful on the subject, which is kind of disturbing, his response. And I think it's very telling, too, because he's not a very good liar. He's not very charismatic like Trump is. He's not very intelligent. So these kind of things, you know, they're red flags, and this was filmed a long time ago. And you kind of, like, juxtapose that to what's happening now, where he literally gave a Nazi salute, and then after that did a speech in front of a German party of neo-Nazis, telling them they have nothing to feel guilty over. That's all real fucked up. I'm sorry, that's fucked up. Recent events proved to be a wild and deeply concerning situation for American democracy. Elon Musk is being used as kind of a corporate warlord to do Trump's dirty work. And the scary part is that this tactic lines up with historical fascist playbooks. Playbooks where private industry and far-right political movements merge to consolidate power, undermine democratic institutions, and suppress opposition. The parallels to Nazi Germany are striking. We've discussed them earlier. In the 1930s, Hitler used powerful industrialists to help dismantle the Weimar Republic, leveraging private enterprise to fund and enforce his agenda while giving them unchecked power in return. The corporate elite, like Krupp and IG Farben, were willing to go along with it because they saw an opportunity for financial and political gain, just like Musk might see in aligning with Trump. Mussolini literally defined fascism as the merger of corporate and state power. And if Musk is blocking elected officials from entering government buildings while being granted access himself as an unelected official, that's a clear indicator that corporate oligarchy is being weaponized against democracy right now. So 1 week after a judge orders federal funding freeze lifted, Trump still hasn't followed the order. Basically just like a mobster, just ignoring it. Like everything he was taught by his mentor.
Breaking news just moments ago, 1 week after a judge ordered the Trump administration to unfreeze federal spending and release all money.
What was that? Roy Cohen, sorry. His mentor, Roy Cohen, I believe.
Judge says Trump hasn't followed his order. Scripps News legal affairs correspondent Abijoy Burnett is live for us right now. Abijoy, I know this is just coming down. Why is this judge issuing a new order in this case regarding government funding?
Hey there, Liz. Well, this judge says new evidence has been presented in this case to prove that there's a possibility.
Yeah, no, he's like a tech nerd, right? I mean, it's not to say that he's got a bad personality per se. You know, if you take Elon Musk, subtract all the Nazi BS and the corporate BS, just his personality before he was kind of like a celebrity figure, I guess. Yeah, just he was kind of probably like a tech nerd, but he wasn't very charismatic like Trump. You know, Trump just knows how to play a room. He was an actor. He was on The Apprentice. You know, they kind of rigged that show to be a show. You know, it was all staged. And Trump, you know, like went to great lengths to make people believe he was somebody he really wasn't. You know, because he's that charismatic. You know, he knows how to play a room in that way. He knows how to make people secure or feel secure.
Possibility that the federal government is not sending out the money that it's been ordered to send out. Remember, when President Donald Trump came back in office, one of his first executive orders had to do with putting a freeze on funding so that they could review how this money was being spent and to also ensure that fraud wasn't in play. But there were ripple effects with regards to this funding freeze. We started to report on issues with the Medicaid portal, for example, because that is something that many people started to report about there being an issue with. We also know that there are organizations across the United States that reported not being able to get the funding that they need because they operate sometimes on a week-to-week basis where.
So they halted funding. So, I mean, the Medicaid portal goes down, meaning they can't perform the maintenance or renew the domain or whatever kind of costs they need to keep that domain up or the portal running goes down. I mean, that's just like a cause and effect. There's a correlation there. And anybody who relies on Medicaid, like somebody like me, is like, oh shit. You know, thank God I actually don't have Medicaid right now. I think I have a couple more months left on my previous employer's benefits, but, you know, pretty soon I will. And, you know, as I've stated before, I applied for food stamps when I was in the gig economy, working at DoorDash as my primary job because I couldn't find another job because my previous employer, which I had which I was certified for and highly trained for, laid everybody off. Not because of anything we did, and they, you know, they lay us off in the winter usually, but they'll rehire us. But they said don't expect rehire because they lost a couple contracts. So they pretty much hired a bunch of people, like new people, new people. And I was a second-year veteran. And they told everybody, even the veterans, like, yeah, except for the core team of a small group of maybe like 10 techs. Yeah, everybody got fired and told not to expect a rehire next season. So we had to look for new jobs. And in between jobs, I applied for food stamps while I was in the gig economy. And I was told that I wasn't working enough hours to be acceptable for food stamps. That was the first time in my entire life that I've been denied food stamps while transitioning between jobs. I had 2 previous experiences with food stamps that worked just like that. The second time wasn't a lot because, again, you know, there's this Republican push to cut food stamps and Social Security nets, safety nets, that directly benefit people like me, despite the propaganda that they would have you believe otherwise. Yeah, so I, for the first time in my life, a program which I had previously been able to rely on to transition between jobs, I can no longer rely on. And we were basically relying on the graciousness of, you know, my mom and other family members who helped out a little bit, which was very nice. I'm very grateful to that. But it was basic, you know, like ramen noodles we were living on for a long time. And still, it's very hard because food prices continue to go up. So, yeah, I might be able to apply for them now. We'll see if I'm working enough. I'm still part-time. But yeah, I might not, even now with the job that I just got, I might not be working enough to get food stamps, which pretty much says to me, hey, you're not struggling enough to get our help. I'm sorry, you're struggling too much right now to get our help. When you struggle a little less, we can help you out. But you're struggling too much right now. Pick yourself up by the bootstraps that you don't have, and you know, when you come back and do that, however impossible it may seem, fuck you. That's some bullshit. I'm sorry, some fucking bullshit. So, one of my main reasons for doing this series, and it's something that really inspired me, was the recent events of the election, is you don't want to wind up on the wrong side of history like these 3 gentlemen will, okay? Mark's my words, these 3 actors will wind up on the wrong side of history.
We are in the presence of a really mythical character. I love mythology. And this individual does not exist on this planet. Nobody in the world could have pulled off what he pulled off, so I'm in awe.
So let us stand with our president. Let us stand up for this truth, that President Trump is the greatest president since Abraham Lincoln.
Look, I'm just happy to be here and accept this, very proud. And I hope in the next 4 years we can get back some of that precious commodity that this country has. That commodity called freedom, all right?
Yeah, so marks my words, these 3 actors will wind up on the wrong side of history. So here we have a day in the life of the oligarchy.
And I'll give you where I'm kind of going with this. These text message exchanges that we're about to look at expose the degree to which Musk is unstable, dangerous, and should have no position of power or any role adjacent to someone as powerful as the President of the United States. If anything, these texts that Sam describes confirm that Musk needs to be pushed as far from power as possible, as quickly as possible. So let's check.
So Mike does ask, who are the 3? The 3 actors are Sylvester Stallone, Mel Gibson, And who was the third guy? I always forget his name. He's Angelina Jolie's dad.
We're in. I could have pulled.
Let us stand up for this.
John Voight. John Voight. So, marks my words, those three actors will wind up on the wrong side of history.
And I'll give you where I'm kind of going with this. These text message exchanges that we're about to look at expose the degree to which Musk is unstable, dangerous, and should have no position of power or any role adjacent to someone as powerful as the President of the United States. If anything, these texts that Sam describes confirm that Musk needs to be pushed as far from power as possible, as quickly as possible. So let's.
Again, if you guys are watching, I will be giving away 5 free memberships at the end of my State of the Union segment before we close out our live stream. So stick with us and you might get a free membership. I have 5 of them to give away. So that's pretty nice. YouTube does that for us. I don't know why other channels don't do it, but I don't see a lot of other channels doing it, to be honest. I see other people gifting in the chat, but the channel itself, I guess apparently YouTube has given us like 10 per month to give away. So we're going to be doing that from now on. So that's pretty nice. I like to give everybody the opportunity to become members. I don't put my price for membership very high, but you know, it does, every little bit does help for funding the channel and keeping it alive. So much love and appreciation there, guys.
Let's check this out. Okay, here is Sam's explanation of how his friendship with Elon kind of imploded. He says, when COVID first invaded our lives in March of 2020, Elon started tweeting in ways I feared would harm his reputation. I also worried his tweets might exacerbate the coming public health emergency. Italy had already fallen off a cliff, and Elon shared the following opinion with his tens of millions of fans. The coronavirus panic is dumb. As a concerned friend, I sent him a private text. This is Sam's text to Elon. Hey, brother, I really think you need to walk back your coronavirus tweet. I know there's a way to parse it that makes sense. Panic is always dumb. But I fear that's not the way most people are reading it. You have an enormous platform. Much of the world looks to you as an authority on all things technical. Coronavirus is a very big deal. And if we don't get our act together, we're going to look just like Italy very soon. If you want to turn some engineers loose on the problem, now would be a good time for a breakthrough in the production of ventilators. Sam goes on to say, Elon's response was, I believe, the first discordant note ever struck in our friendship. Sam, you of all people should not be concerned about this. He included a link to a page on the CDC website showing COVID was not among the top 100 causes of death in the United States. This was a patently silly point to make in the first days of a pandemic. We continued exchanging texts for at least 2 hours. If I hadn't known that I was
Yeah, I think I just want to point out how stupidly silly, and I agree with that notion that's just stupid. Point in the first coming days of a pandemic, you're going to point out like it's not the prominent cause of death in the United States. Like, do you know how they spread? Like, what?
Communicating with Elon Musk, I would have thought I was debating someone who lacked any understanding of basic scientific and mathematical concepts like exponential.
Basically, I mean that's what I see when I hear him talk about anything like that.
And I'm paraphrasing here, that Elon and he did not converge on their views of epidemiology, but they made a compromise, a bet. Elon bet me $1 million to be given to charity against a bottle of fancy tequila, $1,000, that we wouldn't see as many as 35,000 cases of COVID in the US. Cases, not deaths. The terms of the bet reflected what was in his estimation, the near certainty, 1,000 to 1, that he was right. Having already heard credible estimates that there could be 1 million deaths from COVID, estimates that proved fairly accurate, I thought the terms of the bet ridiculous and quite unfair to Elon. I offered to spot him 2 orders of magnitude. I was confident we'd soon have 3.5 million cases of COVID in the US. Elon accused me of having lost my mind and insisted we stick with 35,000. Sam goes on to explain that there was sporadic communication over the next few weeks. Cases grew. Sam would provide data, and Elon would dismiss it. A few weeks later, when the CDC website finally reported 35,000 deaths, not cases, deaths, and 600,000 cases, I sent Elon the following text. Is 35,000 deaths plus 600,000 cases more than 35,000 cases? This text appears to have ended our friendship. Elon never responded, and it was not long before he started maligning me on Twitter for a variety of imaginary offensive. This continues with Sam talking about getting off of Twitter and other things. But there is one other
I lost.
key
I'm
line
not going to
here
admit it. I'm just going to act like a
Sam
child and
says,
attack you.
I bet
basically.
that anyone who knows us both knows that I am telling the truth.
So that's a little peek into the day in the life of an oligarch. Basically, we're dealing with man-children. So here comes another segment called Nothing Warranted under my State of the Union address. This is a very important video that some of you might need to see. I think everybody needs to see it, but it's very important information, and I'll do a more deep dive analysis after we watch it. So.
That is a warrant. No, it's not. It's a Department of Homeland Security order. It's a warrant. Okay. No, it's not a warrant. It's not a warrant under the Constitution of the United States.
So this ICE arrest was shut down by a citizen who knew his rights. And this is a perfect example of why you need to know your rights.
Warrant of arrest of alien. Yeah, warrant of arrest of alien not signed by a judge. It's not a judicial warrant. I have no obligation to oblige by that warrant.
Brian McCormick is the executive director of a local immigrants' rights group. He was pulled over with 2 undocumented immigrants in his car. ICE agents attempted to detain McCormick's passengers. This is a lawful warrant, the cop said.
Warrant signed by a judge of the Immigration and Nationality Act and an official designated with that authority.
Notice he's asking him a question. Is the warrant signed by a judge? This is very important.
Are you hearing this, Mark? Yeah, I'm telling him.
Oh, he's on the phone with somebody. That's right.
Okay. What's that gonna? That's not a warrant. That is a warrant. No, it's not. It's a Department of Homeland Security order. It's a warrant. Okay. No, it's not a warrant. It's not a warrant under the Constitution of the United States. It's a warrant under the Immigration and Nationality Act of the United States. Okay, that's fine, but it's not under the Constitution. You have no jurisdiction over me as a citizen. I'm the driver of this vehicle.
An ICE warrant directs various federal immigrants enforcement agents to arrest the person named in the warrant because it is not issued by a judge. An ICE warrant does not give the immigration enforcement officer the authority to demand entry to a home or private space in order to make an arrest. McCormick said ICE tried to intimidate him into complying.
Here with Title 8, Section 1324 of U.S. Code. Somewhat. Somewhat. In what regard? I'm studying to be a Department of Justice accredited representative, so I've been through trainings. Okay. And I have copies of actually in this box right here, I have a copy of a real warrant and a copy of that, just so people know not to listen to that. Okay. So you're aware of the statutes governing transporting
and harboring illegal aliens in the United States?
I am.
Okay.
ICE tried to intimidate me into relinquishing my rights, and I upheld my unwavering defense of our community. Brian McCormick. ICE officers eventually left the scene without making any arrests. So, in this section, nothing warranted. An ICE warrant, Form I-200 or I-205, is not signed by a judge, but an ICE official. This means it does not grant ICE the legal authority to enter private property, such as homes or non-public areas of business or facilities without consent. For ICE to legally enter a private space without permission, they would need a judicial warrant, one signed by a judge, such as a criminal warrant issued by a court. So why do they call it a warrant then, if it's not technically a warrant? Well, the term warrant can be misleading, intentionally, in my opinion, because most people assume all warrants allow law enforcement to enter. ICE uses the term, in my opinion, ICE uses the term to persuade individuals to cooperate voluntarily, even though the document does not grant them that power. So it's a way of coercion, basically. So what do you do if ICE shows up? Well, ask to see the warrant. If it's an ICE warrant not signed by a judge, they cannot enter without permission. So do not open the door. If they don't have a judicial warrant, they can only enter if someone lets them in. Remain silent. It's important to do this. If you have the right to remain silent and not answer any questions. Remember your Miranda rights. Don't give them any information they could use against you. Ask for an attorney. If detained, request legal representation immediately. So, in the next section of my State of the Union address, we have the fuck around and find out section. So, unfortunately, we have to show these, and I don't like to berate people who voted for Trump, but it's important to see the consequences of some of these actions. This man voted for Trump and his wife got deported. And, you know, it might be a little humorous to some people, but it's...
Let's talk about
imagine that happening to you. I can't imagine that happening to me. That would be absolutely devastating. I wouldn't be able to do podcasts if that happened to me. I would be absolutely heartbroken. So this is something that's not to be taken lightly. We need to have empathy for people people make mistakes. That's what makes us people. We all make mistakes. So it's important not to berate these people, but we do need to heed their lesson and show the consequences of when you fuck around and find out. You need to learn history, and you need to listen to people when they say that, fascism is here, and it's here now.
Breaking and also infuriating story out of Florida, because it really perfectly encapsulates the hypocrisy and the cruelty and the sheer lack of foresight that has really defined Trump's immigration policies, especially in their early days of these ICE raids. A Florida man, a Trump-supporting Florida man, is now pleading with Trump to, quote, work something out, after ICE agents swooped in, detained his wife, and deported her back to Venezuela. This is a woman who was in the process of getting her papers in order, trying to do everything the right way, as they say, but it didn't matter. She's gone. Her husband is begging, please let my wife stay here. She deserves to be here. So let's check out this video and then talk about it.
They turned off the cameras, excuse my language, and then they took my wife.
This man, who wished not to be identified, says his wife is from Venezuela and has lived in the United States for a few years. She was one of 3 people taken from this home. I'm told the 2 others were men who worked in construction. You see them here. This video, only 1 minute and 52 seconds long. We do not see his wife being removed from the home. But this is a picture of her that he keeps in his wallet. Her name is Vianis Ramirez, and he says she was in the process of becoming a United States citizen.
She already had a court date. She was good. Everything's good. He just came in and snatched her.
These are pictures from the Department of Homeland Security detaining other undocumented men and women in Broward County.
It's despicable what they're doing right now. It's very embarrassing.
President Donald Trump arrived at his Trump National Golf Resort in Doral Saturday, set to host GOP leaders for a conference. This man hopes this message makes it to him.
I get a chance to talk to you, man. Yo, please, man, let's work something out. So you, man, let me keep my wife here in the United States, man. She deserves to be here, man.
ICE reports nearly 1,000 raids in the country on Sunday alone, which is up from just under 300 on Saturday. Here at the detention center in Miramar, things have been quiet for several hours, but we will continue to monitor this situation and bring you the developing news on raids in South Florida as they happen.
So what is this about? This story is really a stark reminder of a phenomenon that we've talked about before and we see all the time in politics.
Mitchell says, my brain hurts and this is why I prefer religion. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot to take in. The Red Pill series is definitely not for the faint of hearted. We do go down the rabbit hole pretty deep here, and some of it is pretty shocking and controversial. But it is, at the end of the day, I try to end with a good message. So that's the positive aspect that I try to keep alive in the series, even though it does take some dark turns, especially now with this current, I'm not calling it an administration, like a lot of, like I've heard some people refer to it as the Trump administration or the Trump regime. I'm taking the latter route, as some people have. It's a regime. It's not an administration anymore. So
people tend to assume that harsh, punitive policies will always affect somebody else. It's not going to be my family. It's not going to be my partner. Exactly. It's not going to be me. It's not going to be the people at the local restaurant that I like going to. It's not going to be people such that the supply chain for fruits or vegetables I get at my grocery store, they're not going to be affected. And the Florida man voted for Trump, presumably because he got into the rhetoric of cracking down on illegal immigration. And maybe he thought they're only going after bad people, the criminals, the ones who really don't belong here. And we've talked before how the thing is, when you empower a system that operates on fear and cruelty as a feature and indiscriminate enforcement, which is an important part of it, it doesn't discriminate. That's the way it works. It doesn't care if your spouse is the one who is hardworking and law-abiding. It doesn't care if they were in the process of legalizing their status but hadn't quite done it yet. It doesn't care about your family staying together. It doesn't care about how your life is going to be affected. This is the way that these systems work. And this guy is learning the lesson the hard way. Trump's immigration raids and the deportation policies, they were never about law and order. And of course, the entire concept of anything Trump doing being about law and order is laughable, given that he's one of the biggest scofflaw flouters of the law there is. But put that aside for a second. The entire ICE raid milieu was about making people afraid, dividing communities, turning people against each other, phone numbers to report suspected this and that, and appealing to the basest instincts of MAGA world. And we've seen this before. Time and time again, we see stories like this one where Trump's own supporters get caught in the crossfire. The farmers that support Trump are the ones that get screwed by the tariffs. The companies that support Trump are the ones that get screwed by his ever-changing opinion about his H-1B.
Really is like an abusive situation where you see like an abusive parental situation where the parent abuses the child and the child always goes back to the parent and defends the parent's terrible and atrocious behavior. That's kind of like the analogy that I get in my head, at least. Trump farmers fuck around and find out as their funding is cut off. We saw this briefly earlier. I believe this is the clip.
I don't know if y'all are on Farm Talk like I am, but did y'all see the video of that young farmer, Skylar, who voted for Trump and now is in danger of losing his family farm because Trump is going to enact the policies that he promised to enact. And Skylar and his family farm are getting screwed in the process. If you haven't seen it, he's made a few videos because he got pretty defensive when folks in the comments on his first video were like, fuck around and find out. Oh, isn't this what you voted for? Did you not research the candidate and his policies before you decided to vote for him? I believe for the third time. This is the third time he's voted for Trump.
Serve any help? I hope you lose your farm. How much you selling it for? All those comments, that's super helpful. You think that you're not helping, you think that it's funny, but you commenting boosts the post, and I'm getting more views, therefore it is helping me.
Is it saving your farm?
It's kind of a double-edged sword there. You think you're getting your point across, but in reality, you're actually helping me. But
really,
I wanted to start off by saying I did vote for Donald Trump.
3 times.
Just because I voted for Donald Trump doesn't mean I believe in everything that he stands for. And that everybody has to understand that. Just because you vote one way doesn't mean you agree with everything that that party stands for.
Now, I'm a big proponent of supporting small family farms, supporting local sustainable agriculture. But son, I am struggling to have sympathy for you, a cis-het white dude who owns a farm in Missouri, for voting for Donald Trump. You are the demographic that deserves to feel the pinch, deserves to feel the consequences of your actions. The folks who are going to suffer the most, as I have said, the folks who are at risk of losing their lives, their livelihoods, their homes, their well-being, their futures, those folks, by and large, are the folks who did not vote for this regime. But you did. You chose this. And son, I know in this defensive follow-up video, you're like, oh, joke's on you guys because I'm getting mad views on my original video. Cool. Is that somehow stopping the Trump administration from enacting Project 2025? Is that going to save your farm? Are you going to get water to your cattle now? Like, great for you if you're going to make a couple $100 off that video. It doesn't change the regime that you actively supported. That has come to power and is doing all of the things that they promised they would do. Now, you said in the comments of your video that you were too busy to really dig into all of Trump's plans. You didn't have the time to research. But I'm sorry, you are a grown-ass man. You are a whole adult, and it is incumbent upon you to do due diligence and do research before you decide to vote for a candidate. You don't get to play, oh, poor widow me, I was ignorant, I didn't know what I was voting for. You don't get to play that game. You are a grown-up. You own a farm, and you couldn't bother to read the section on agriculture in Project 2025? I cover sustainable agriculture for my business, but I don't have a farm, and I had the time to read up on it. I made it a priority. It's wild to me that you as a farmer did not, and now you want to say, this isn't my fault, guys, I just didn't know. No, what you thought is the parts of Trump's platform of Project 2025 that you liked, like deporting brown people, like removing women's access to reproductive health care, like taking away free and reduced lunch for poor kids, restricting Medicaid, food stamps, WIC, which is weird because as a farmer, you should know how many of those programs are linked to agricultural subsidies. I mean, WIC is basically one of the biggest ag subsidies in the country. You honed in on all the things on Trump's platform that were going to get you what you wanted, but you didn't even bother. You were too busy to do the due diligence.
You didn't read the fine print, basically. You followed the charismatic rhetoric of the Trump rallies, and you didn't bother to do the research of the critics. And this is what I always emphasize. Anytime I go into researching a free energy device, I always go into the critics first, right? Oh, there's a new device on the YouTube, right? There's a new device circulating YouTube. Let's look it up. Look at the video that this guy has, and let's now look at the critics. What do the critics have to say? You know, like, you don't just listen to what the guy has to say and take his word for it. You have to analyze things logically. You have to be a critical thinker, not a sheep.
Of reading through the parts of his policies. Project 2025 has been published on the internet for a long time now. You could have gone and said, as a small business owner, as a family farmer, my legacy, my business is super important to me and my family. I should probably read what's in this document about ag. Should maybe investigate before I decide to vote for this man for president. I should probably investigate if his policies might have a negative impact on my farm. But you didn't, and now you're crying on the internet about it.
It's sad. It's devastating what is going to happen to family farmers. But it's real weird that y'all can't remember. Your memory is so short. Trump's first administration, farmers all over the country went out of business. Ask any soybean farmer from his first administration what that was like for them. Oh, wait, you can't, because a lot of those small farms are now out of business. There are a whole lot of small farmers crying on the internet. And actually, in his last campaign, there were farmers coming to him and being like, you're going to prioritize family farms, right? And of course, he lied and said yes. But if you look at his track record, who are the only entities that he has an interest in enriching and supporting and making more secure? Giant corporations. He wants to drive family farmers out of business so that you sell your land and your business to big ag. He only cares about big ag, not about you. I mean, he actually only cares about consolidating his power, and he will pander to your pet issues, whatever your conservative religious values are, whatever racism you have. He'll put all of that in there to get your loyalty, but you do.
Yes, as with will many charismatic figures and people of cult of personalities, they will tell you what you want to hear. So, as a quick reminder, and as we've touched on earlier, Hitler, the day he became chancellor, pardoned 8,000 violent Nazi war criminals. This paralleled this to the first day of Trump's second term, where he pardoned the January 6th insurrectionists, whom he provoked to fight like hell, even though he knew some of them were armed. Neo-Nazi, here we have a video of neo-Nazis posts revealing alarming Trump administration plot.
We're just 1 week into Donald Trump's second term, and there are some people very excited about it. You can probably tell from the B-roll that they're not the best people, but yeah, no, neo-Nazis are apparently very psyched, very hyped about the opportunity now presented to them to get their message across, to do recruitment, to not be as restrained on social media as they might have been. And so we're going to start off with a little bit of video of the Patriot Front rallying in D.C. This is during the annual March for Life, where both Donald Trump and J.D. Vance were there. So here's a little bit of footage of that. Oh, so they can wear masks. But anyway, look, not a big fan of them, obviously, but I do want to give credit to Donald Trump and J.D. Vance because they actually stopped their prepared remarks to make clear that those sorts of organizations are unacceptable, that there will be no tolerance for that sort of hatred and violence. So let's go to that footage now.
Yeah, they
I'm
should have.
joking. No, of course that's not a thing that happened. They'll probably be in the administration soon.
Yeah,
But
they didn't
anyway,
condemn
they
it,
are
obviously.
excited. So one
Those are their
neo-Nazi account on
supporters.
Telegram posted, "Be ready to cash out the next 4 years. Get the bag. Infiltrate existing institutions with power. Build new institutions while we have breathing room. And tear down anything leftist." Goes on to say the left is exhausted, which, you know, not untrue. But
That's
anyway,
not
extremely
untrue.
unpopular and has
Not
been
untrue.
divested from by their tech bro backers. When were the tech bros ever boosting the left? Anyway, now is the time to openly advocate for
I
ourselves.
don't
Now is
know.
the time to
Nobody
go
from
from
the tech
defense and
community ever
survival
boosted
towards
me.
organizing and swift action. And you even have big organizations like the Aryan Freedom Network. This is a neo-Nazi political organization that has
God.
chapters all over the country saying that we're going to go track down companies harboring these illegal migrants. And so they not only want to organize for their own sake, but they want to get involved in some of the marquee policies of the Trump administration. And you can sort of see, Tori, why they might be excited. Not only has Donald Trump said that these organizations like the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, maybe there's a role for them in politics these days, now that he's released some of them
wow.
from prison. But Elon Musk has been
I mean, that's the
doing
next step. He releases some of the insurrectionists who tried to do a violent coup and overthrow our government. They had a guillotine ready to, or a device ready to hang Nancy Pelosi. I mean, this is dangerous territory. It was stopped, thank God. We covered it live on this channel, by the way. And this was, you know, this was terrifying, and it was stopped. and now he's pardoned these people. That's the next step, giving some of these Proud Boys, his gay army, to give them positions in the government. Yeah, that would be terrifying, but that could happen. Could happen. All right, so now we have a video on the health scheme system. United Healthcare CEO, murderer or alleged murderer, exposes healthcare Hunger Games.
We had, in 2016, 2020, when universal healthcare was finally part of the debate, thanks to Bernie Sanders, you just kept hearing this kind of...
Yes, you can all thank Bernie Sanders for the mainstream light on the debate of universal healthcare. Before that, it wasn't really a prominent goal for the working class. He really did do a good job in shining a light on that kind of corruption and how Americans are really getting the short end of the stick in that kind of deal compared to compared to every other modern industrialized country. Just ask people that we know from Canada. They don't hate their healthcare system. It's not like, they don't have issues with it, but they're not going to come over here and become an American citizen for our healthcare. Are you kidding me? They're going to fucking laugh at you if you think our healthcare is better than theirs. They have universal care. If they get cancer, it's going to be covered. If we get cancer, we're fucked. Even if you have insurance in a lot of cases, you're still fucked.
I viewed it as propaganda, but, people like their private healthcare plans. Well, I mean, you could put a poll, you could phrase a poll however you want it to get the answer you want, but the response sure seems to be people don't love their private healthcare, or at the very least, they feel that the private healthcare is, essentially threatening their lives. What are your thoughts how this kind of...
So, as we've discussed earlier, fascism, as described by Benito Mussolini, who is the godfather of modern fascism, he described fascism himself as the successful unification of corporate and state power. What do we see with the Trump administration? The successful unification of corporate and state power. As unelected official, Elon Musk is raiding federal buildings and basically getting access to all of our information and subverting democracy. So yeah, that's fascism, bro. I don't really know how to boil it down any simpler than that for you. If you can't get the idea of fascism down into your head at that point, then it might need to digest in your system a little bit before you can understand it, because you might have been drinking the Kool-Aid.
Revisited to the claims that were made by Biden, Hillary Clinton, the media, that we can't take away people's private health care from them.
What I think people misunderstand about that, Jordan, is it's in the context of a system that creates huge insecurity, and people are literally afraid of getting sick and very afraid of going to the hospital. So in the context of the system and the fear that they experience, they'll grab onto whatever they have. And what they have is their current, usually employer-provided insurance. And so when you say, God, you're going to take that away, you're like, whoa, I'm scared of what could happen. Rightly so. So we have this problem where we have a very clear policy advantage, whether it's in terms of financing, cost control, or just coverage and access to care that Medicare for All would provide. But people are afraid of losing what they have and don't necessarily believe it. And you can tell, obviously, that people are very skeptical of claims made by politicians. Or I think Senator Sanders has much more credibility, but we certainly ran into that. So that's number one. Number two is that there's a huge propaganda machine that supports the private insurance industry, starting with the Democratic Party. They claimed that Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, was a solution to our...
Exactly. This is another important fact. People often attack me as a liberal, and some people have called me a Democrat. I'm not. I'm an independent. I'm a libertarian socialist, so I'm way far left than the Democratic Party is. There are certain members inside the Democratic Party, because of our political limitations of our two-party system, there are some members in the Democratic Party who I do support, including AOC, who do lean more progressive and more left. However, the prominent makeup of the Democratic Party is bought and paid for the same corporations that bought and paid for the Republican Party years before it. So it's just two sides of the same corrupt coin, and there's really no point in putting your effort into one party or the other unless specific circumstances state otherwise. So in general, it's more of a systemic reform that I advocate for, because the two-party system is just basic corruption all around.
Our crisis. And, well, it certainly helped people. It saved lives, no question about it. But
you can also see this play out in some of my analysis that I did earlier on in this channel, specifically the video that exposes the political career of Nancy Pelosi and how the system kind of pushes even the most ideologues to the center and often to the right on economic policy due to the way the system is set up with lobbying and political influence. It just it exposes the political career of Nancy Pelosi, how she started out in a position of advocating for universal health care and now is kind of like a cheerleader and a defender of some of more conservative policies in the Democratic Party. So that video is on my channel. It's been on there for a long time. It's one of the first videos I put up.
But it's been a windfall, as the lever points out, for companies like United Health. And so there is also a problem of credibility. We talked about in 2016 and 2020 the politics of resentment. And that anger that's behind that is exposed, I think, in the election results and also in reaction to the shooting. People are angry, and they're angry. They feel like maybe someone else got a better deal.
Yes, people are angry, and I think the important thing to remember is is to place that anger in the effective, appropriate place, and not at each other as working class people. I don't care if you voted for Trump. I don't support the man. I think he's a fascist. But if you're a worker, I don't care that you voted for him. I care that we come to terms and see that there is a way forward for both people across the political spectrum. So that's where we are right now, because if history has taught us anything, the way to stomp out fascism in its tracks is collective effort. And we need to organize collective effort across the ideological spectrum. And if we don't do that, it could be very shaky ground that we're on. But it's important to come to terms and see common ground between leftist and rightist ideas. And specifically, it's my opinion that the more people look into this and take, the political compass test and actually research what socialism is, the more people will actually realize who were Republicans in the working class, they might be more leftist than they thought originally. Maybe not on social issues, but definitely on economic issues. It's in my opinion that more people are on the left who are in the working class on economic issues than they think they are, just because of how skewed terminology has become, right? So if you don't believe me, go and take the political compass test. Go to political compass test on Google and take the political compass test and see where you fall on the political compass and rate yourself compared to other, mainstream people. It may surprise you. It may surprise you. Just for everybody's context, I am, and I did get on that. I might have shifted since then, but, I don't know. We'll take another test maybe in another stream. But I am, based on that test, a libertarian socialist. So specifically a Marxist-inspired libertarian socialist. Meaning that I do not like big government, but in instances where it is authoritarian and not unnecessary. But I do like government to come in and provide universal health care at the cost of the rich people. Yes, the rich people should be paying for those kinds of services for the bottom half of society, for sure, especially in the richest country where it really wouldn't affect them that much.
Generally, that's the wealthy, of course, but not everyone, even who's wealthy, gets a good deal under the system. But there's a lot of that resentment about the healthcare industry and a lot of anger. And Democratic politicians in particular, who are supposed to be the champions of reform, have fundamentally misunderstood the public's perception of the system.
So Mitchell says, I intuit our real problems are deeper than left and right as well. Hence our search for free energy to bring more liberation than any leader. Yes. And, you know, specifically, it's hard for me because I'm in a position where I have to kind of bridge the gap between, you know, the forbidden science of Marxian analysis in economics and the critique of our capitalist system and how it suppresses free energy systems and groundbreaking technology that would change the macroeconomic status quo and the petrodollar system altogether. I specifically am in a tough position because I have to bridge the gap between that kind of analysis and the fringe science that I'm involved in with the fringe science team that we co-opted together, Nathan and I, and trying to heal that divide, because most of fringe science communities have been co-opted by right-wing radical conspiracy theories and conspiracy circles in the right wing. So and a lot of it, in my opinion, is either misinformation or a deliberate campaign to spread, wrong information or misleading information in those science communities. There's a lot of wrong and misleading information. I think a lot of it is intentional. And unfortunately, a lot of those fringe communities have been co-opted by right-wing conspiracy circles, and it's been hard for me to kind of bridge that gap. But it's all related, and it seems to be even only Dr. Greer, the only person who even touches on the subject of bridging that gap by touching on the subject of industrial fascism. And he does use the term, but he doesn't specifically address the capitalist critique. And in my opinion, that's kind of like the important thing there is, you know, what led to the industrial fascism? Why were the fascists successful? It's the organization of labor. And a lot of the problem in my trying to defend the Marxist critique of capitalism is simply trying to inform people, because they don't know the real definition of capitalism. You know, they'll fight me on, even to this day, even after I explain it 1,000 times, people will fight me on this issue. What about the markets, or, your property, blah, 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 private property. The actual definition that matters, because things have different definitions, true. But the actual definition that matters, when you're looking at definitions, you want to define something by what is different about it, right? Okay, and that's how we define things. We separate that from which it isn't. And when you look at capitalism, our current definition is wrong. I'm sorry. It's not it's obfuscating. It's not that it's, wrong, but it's not a correct, accurate definition. It's not entirely accurate. And what do I mean by that? Well, capitalism ensures the conditions of its own existence by obfuscating its own definition. If you look at the textbook definition of capitalism, it is a system of private property and free markets, right? Whatever free is subjective, right? So let's just say private property and markets. But that's not the true definition of capitalism. That's not what separates capitalism from previous economic systems. That's not what truly defines it and separates that from which it isn't. Okay, we've had markets all throughout most of modern history, modern recorded history. We've had private property throughout modern history in different economic systems. So what's different about capitalism is the organization of labor with a small individual or a small group or a single individual who owns the means of production, that owns the business, juxtaposed against a mass of workers who don't own the business, have no democratic say. They don't have any say. It's more of an authoritarian hierarchy of power, right? And that employee-employer relationship is what defines the economic system and separates it from previous economic systems. And specifically that combined with the aspect of privately publicly tradable shares, privately owned, publicly tradable shares of a company. Those two aspects are really what define capitalism, and that's what my definition, when I'm talking about capitalism, that's what I'm saying. I'm not talking about markets or private property. You can have and debate about those in other economic systems. That's not what I'm talking about. So it's very hard for me to bridge that gap when going into it, people don't even have the right definition and they attack you just based off of wrong information like that. And I have to kind of come in and straighten everybody out and tell everybody, look, you know, that might be the textbook definition, but if you study economics, that's really not what defines capitalism from other economic systems. If you want to go a little bit further, you would define it, and in my opinion, by the organization of labor. And when I'm talking about capitalism, I want you to be aware that is my definition, not private property and markets. Okay, so that is very important to emphasize, because people just sometimes they don't listen and they just repeat the same thing over and over without actually letting it digest in their head what I actually said. So please keep that in mind. And it is a tough job trying to bridge that gap between those two communities, disparate communities. So it's going to be a long and tedious process, but I think it's possible. It has to be. We have to be optimistic. So right-leaning independent Jesse Ventura, who I probably would have voted for Jesse Ventura if he ran, to be honest. Even though I don't agree with everything, all of his policies, I probably would have voted for him or Bernie Sanders. Suffice it to say, he has a message for everybody, and that message is that billionaires should not exist. And I agree.
There should not be one billionaire in America. None.
Not one.
I'll tell you why. Because there is nobody that works hard enough to earn $1 billion.
Exactly. This
and
is the most important argument to make. Okay?
Is this the two jobs I did in my life that were physically the most demanding and mentally the most difficult that I ever did paid me the least amount of money.
Exactly.
One was going through buds, and I challenge any billionaire to put up with 6 weeks of that at $62 every 2 weeks, And the second was right before I went in the Navy. I had a job with the Minnesota Highway Department, couple bucks above minimum wage. I worked for the bridge crew, and you know what my job was? I worked a 4-day work week, 10 hours a day, so I could have Friday, Saturday, Sunday for the weekend. You're 18, of course you're going to do that. But I worked 40 hours in 4 days on the bridge crew, and guess what I did? Ran the 80-pound jackhammer. I challenge any billionaire to run the jackhammer for 40 hours 1 week and tell me he works harder than that. No, he doesn't. That's why I believe there should not be a billionaire in the world.
Former wrestler and Minnesota Governor Jesse the Body Ventura was preaching here. The video is courtesy of Fandom's Potlight on TikTok. Ventura wouldn't be done.
Yeah, we don't need your commentary. We just need Jesse. All right, so Jesse Ventura is absolutely right here. There's nobody who works that hard to earn that much money. That is bullshit. You know how they earn that money? They stepped on other people and they exploited other people like they're workers. Okay? Like Elon Musk, who fired somebody because he took his 30-minute lunch. Fuck you, Elon. So, right now, we also have a dismantling of the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Remember ridiculous predatory fees? The CFPB, or Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, was enacted by progressive Senator Elizabeth Warren, and was successfully gotten back and has successfully gotten back $21 billion to consumers who were ripped off from predatory practices. Before the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was established in 2011, big banks were notorious for predatory overdraft fees and other exploitative financial practices. Some of you might remember some of this. And some of the worst examples include reordering transactions to maximize fees. This is one of the most notorious ones that was scandalous, okay? Some of you might remember this. Many banks engaged in a practice called high-to-low transaction reordering. Instead of processing transactions in the order they occurred, banks would process the largest transaction first. This would drain the account balance faster, causing multiple subsequent smaller transactions to trigger each overdraft fee. This led to customers being charged multiple overdraft fees in a single day, sometimes totaling hundreds of dollars. That was a very notorious scam. So in 2011, Bank of America was forced to pay $410 million in a class action lawsuit over this practice. Other banks like Wells Fargo and JP Morgan Chase were also sued. They also participated in excessive overdraft fees. Many banks charge exorbitant fees for even small overdrafts. It was common for a customer to be charged $35 for overdrawing by just $1 or a few dollars. Worse, some banks charge these fees multiple times per day, leading to a situation where a small mistake could result in over $100 in fees. I had that happen to me once. And I was like, what the hell is going on? So in 2010, a report found that banks were making nearly $38 billion. Banks were making $38 billion a year in overdraft fees alone. Let that sink in. And the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau got a lot of that money back to people. So automatic overdraft protection without consent. This is another scandalous one. Before regulations changed, banks automatically enrolled customers in overdraft protection programs without their consent. But this was misleading. This meant that if a transaction caused a negative balance, instead of declining the transaction, the bank would approve it and hit the customer with a fee. So, overdraft protection. Fuckers. So Wells Fargo and other major banks were caught automatically enrolling customers and later had to change their policies due to government intervention, specifically by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is now being dismantled. Charging fees on pending transactions. This is a good moneymaker here, because this is something that you can't avoid. You really can't. Some banks charged overdraft fees on transactions that were still pending, even if the customer later deposited money before the transaction was finalized. That's fucked up. Let us put this up here so you guys can see the picture. So, reforms after the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and other regulations. In 2010, the new Federal Reserve rules required banks to obtain customers' explicit consent before enrolling them in overdraft programs. The CFPB, founded in 2011, cracked down on deceptive banking practices, leading to lawsuits and fines against big banks, and $21 billion returned to customers. Some banks under public pressure have since reduced or eliminated overdraft fees, but this might return, because you better mark my words, with the CFPB closed, these fees will most certainly start to happen again. So here we have, art imitating life. Again, as I've said many times, pay attention to art because it imitates life and what's really going on. We have a cartoon drawing of the situation here. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau closed. and somebody got an overdraft fee of $500. Oh boy, that's what happens. So here's the video that goes along with this little news
The Trump
update.
administration has begun dismantling the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which prevents Americans from getting scammed, defrauded, and ripped off by big banks, payday lenders, and other financial institutions. It's a pretty important government agency, and it's returned $21 billion to Americans
Yeah, this is bad business.
who are essentially stolen from by these financial institutions. So we're going to get to who's behind I don't know if it's going to be temporary. I don't know what the end result is going to be, but the at least temporary shuttering of the CFPB in just a moment. But Cenk.
Yes, so the question in this story is it populist to shut down a government organization, or is it the opposite of populism to take away police from Wall Street? So let's find out.
All right, well, Trump appointed someone by the name of Russell Vought as the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's acting director. He was also confirmed by the Senate to serve as the head of the Office of Management and Budget. Now, as soon as he was in a position of power, he started targeting the government agency that actually returns money to Americans who have been screwed over. So on Saturday, Vought ordered the CFPB's 1,700 employees to stop nearly all their work and announced plans to cut off the agency's funding. Then on Sunday, he closed the Bureau's headquarters for the coming week. Workers who tried to retrieve their laptops from the office were turned away, according to employees. So Vought also said that he intended to essentially cut off the Consumer Bureau's funding, which comes directly from the Federal Reserve. Okay, so the Federal Reserve.
So if you left anything important in the office, you're fucked. This is kind of devastating news because Elizabeth Warren fought really hard for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and she did a wonderful job. Even though I don't agree with some of her policy stances recently, especially with kind of her pivot recently with universal health care, suffice it to say, she did a wonderful job with the CFPB, and it's just going to be sad now that the banks are going to be raping us again. So they'll have that opportunity to change everything back. Elon defends fascism with the most ridiculous excuse ever. If someone were committing fraud, they'd at least try to make it believable. So, where's the video of this? Oh, here it is. Yeah, so if somebody were committing fraud, they'd at least try to make it believable. No scammer is out here saying they're 150 years old. It would instantly raise red flags, right? The idea that Musk would justify a mass data theft by pointing to something so absurd as, oh, we found people registered as 150 years old, it's just a weak attempt to deflect. So here we have that right here as him justifying his reason behind his fascist takeover of a federal building.
Is this actually in the best interest of the people? And if it is, it's approved. If it's not, we should think about it. So, there's crazy things like just cursory examination of Social Security, and we've got people in there that are 150 years old. Now, do you know anyone who's 150? I don't know. Okay. They should be on the Guinness Book of World Records.
So I can tell you right there, that's a straight up lie. Even if he caught somebody at that age, it was probably just one instance that was an error. There's nobody who's going to be taking advantage of the system and registering as 150 years old, getting Social Security benefits. That's a huge red flag. So if that's even in a reality at all, it's a statistic insignificant point. A statistically insignificant point to make. It's just a distraction saying, hey, this justifies my fascistic tendencies. So, this is a big wake-up call, right? People, I've heard people say, you know, like, well, why you keep calling Trump a fascist or Nazi, or calling his regime a Nazi regime? Well, you know, there's a certain checklist that you have to go through for fascism. Okay, so in specifically, we look at the dehumanizing language and fear-mongering immigrants or outsiders. All right, this is straight out the Nazi playbook. Dehumanizing language and fear-mongering immigrants or outsiders, instead of unifying language like Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders likes to use language to unify the working class people, not divide them. That's very important to distinguish. Admiration of authoritarians like Kim Jong-il. All right? That's another hallmark. Undermining democratic institutions, like having a non-elected official, Elon Musk, hack into a federal building. This is Watergate shit, people. It's open, out in the open. Just because it's out in the open doesn't make it any less unconstitutional or shocking. Encouraging political violence. Instead of having the Proud Boys stand back and stand by like he's asked them to do before, during the fucking insurrection, Trump ordered his gay little army to fight like hell when they were armed and aimed at a hostile takeover. All right, and ultra nationalist policies. This ultra nationalism is another hallmark feature of fascist regimes. All right. Policies that are aimed at discriminating against minorities. Nazis blamed Jews, socialists, and communists on the failures of capitalism when they had their depression. MAGA has immigrants. If you don't see the parallels, you could be in big trouble. So here we have Make Europe Great Again. This is a Tesla boycott in Europe where somebody spray painted "fuck off fascist" on their sign. And I honestly don't blame them. You can fuck off, you fascist asshole. So the conclusion for this is the road ahead. Understanding the mechanics of belief and persuasion is key to navigating our divided world. By examining past movements, recognizing manipulation tactics, and engaging in meaningful conversations, we can start to bridge the gap that divides us. And look at these boycott numbers. So you see the drop. Everybody's aware of it around the world. So it might not have hit quite as hard here yet in America, but that's just because there might be a latency. You know, it hits here last because for some reason we have such a stranglehold of information and a filter of propaganda for our media. We are the last to realize things that are affecting us first, which is unfortunate. But look at, we see the rest of the world like clearly boycotting Tesla and Tesla losing momentum and money all over the world. From the UK to Portugal, Norway, Spain, Sweden, Denmark, the numbers are down. So the final thought here is that history shows us that deprogramming is possible, but it's a slow and uneven process. Whether it's exposing the truth about sweat money tearing down the illusions of pseudo-economics, or confronting the echoes of cults of personality, the path forward requires empathy, education, and action. All right. As promised, you guys, I am going to gift out 5 free memberships. So give me a moment and I'll load that up. Again, if you haven't enabled the toggle switch that if you haven't enabled the toggle switch in your chat, it's the 3 buttons at the top that says receive gifts. Do that now. So it's the 3 buttons, the 3 dots, the settings option on the chat. It's the 3 dots at the top right. You click that and there should be a toggle switch that says enable receive gifts. So you want to make sure that's enabled in a moment when I send out these 5 free memberships. So give me one moment and I will...
Let's talk about
I have to find the correct tab. Un momento. Oh, there it is. All right, guys. So I really appreciate all the love and support, as always. Here is your 5 free memberships. Elijah, you were gifted a free membership. Welcome. Welcome to Beneficence TV membership. Okay, we have XTOS, Earthworm Jim, Mike Does, and Delta KB. All new members of our fringe think tank here with the members section enabled and emojis activated. So activate those emojis, ladies and gentlemen, and get your fringe on, because we are just at the tip of the iceberg for what is possible with science and technology here on Beneficence TV. We have a lot of amazing breakthroughs coming through with the Lightning Thief device that I'm working on, utilizing 0-point energy from the vacuum, and we will be working on that in future interactive mini lab live streams. So the next live stream we have planned is a podcast called Builder's Workshop. But I am planning on doing a mini lab, an interactive mini lab, some point tomorrow, maybe before or after the podcast. We'll see what goes on with my personal life. But the goal of that stream is going to be walking you guys through the build process of a Lightning Thief device. We're going to solder all the connections, the screw terminals on, and we're going to build put the case together and put the components in, and I'm going to do everything from start to finish and show you the entire process. And that will be one that we're going to be making as a prototype to send out to one of the team. And as we, move along in our process to get some of those out to the team for beta testing before our consumer versions hit the market, hopefully later this year, if not sometime early 2026. So plan on lots of future content, lots of amazing future content and updates here on Beneficence TV. As always, a lot of love and support coming my way from the chat, and I really appreciate all you guys, all the amazing suggestions and comments, and even if we don't agree, it is very awesome that you come here and you give me your thoughts and your opinions. I love to hear it. It doesn't matter if you agree or not. Please come in and have a good time with us. And thanks for tuning into the Red Pill series. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep conversations going. I'm the Benefactor. Good night, and good luck.
Changing the system, we're treated like a toy. Ideas misunderstood.